Chapter 1190. However, Yang Su was different from the other aristocratic families. All the soldiers under his command could receive reasonable rewards. If they died on the battlefield while carrying out Yang Su's deadly missions, Yang Su would ensure that their families received reasonable compensation. If they were lucky enough to survive, then Yang Su would also ask for credit for them, ensuring that they could be promoted, get rich, and bring benefits to their descendants. In the feudal dynasty, the relationship between the famous generals and the emperor was the most harmonious and the least harmonious because the emperor had to sit in the imperial court regardless of whether he could lead the troops or not. He could not personally lead the troops every time there was a war, so he had to raise those generals who could fight and dared to fight to ensure that he would not be defeated by the enemy after a war. However, the existence of these generals was a threat to the imperial power that could not be underestimated. Countless examples of mutiny, seizing power, rebelling, and seizing power could be found in the history books. Therefore, most emperors were in a state of absolute vigilance against the generals under their command. From the perspective of the soldiers, they did not care who was sitting on the dragon throne. They only cared about whether they could eat their fill, how many merits they could achieve in the next war, whether they would die on the battlefield, and so on. Therefore, in the eyes of ordinary soldiers, an outstanding general was much more desirable than the emperor. Whether the emperor died or not did not have much to do with them. However, whether the general was powerful or not, it was directly related to their vital interests. Except for the Song dynasty. Zhao Kuangyin, the founder of the Song dynasty, was indeed a character. He could fight on horseback and rule the country when he was dismounted. Even because of his existence, the military power in the hands of the generals was weakened to the extreme. After all, Zhao Kuangyin knew military affairs and how to fight. From all aspects, if the generals had any tricks, Zhao Kuangyin could understand what was going on. Therefore, after he held all the military power in his hands, he could also ensure that the military power of the Song dynasty was still strong. However, the problem was that the only emperor of the Song dynasty who could do this was Zhao Kuangyin. None of the later emperors of the Song dynasty had this kind of ability, but they still maintained this kind of strong and weak leadership model, resulting in the generals not knowing the soldiers, and the soldiers not knowing the generals. Only at the last moment would they decide which general would lead which army. The consequence of this kind of approach was that the Song dynasty, under the circumstances of being rich all over the world, had done the best in all aspects of military. The source of soldiers, equipment and training were all not bad, but they could not win the war. In the end, their backbone was broken and they still did not know where they went wrong. The Song dynasty emperors and generals were not so incompatible because the generals of the Song dynasty were not a threat to the imperial power at all. Even the soldiers of the Song dynasty had to have their arms and faces tattooed. At that time, those who had their arms and faces tattooed were basically local ruffians and even criminals. It was tantamount to directly hitting the social status of the soldiers directly to the lowest level. Even the famous general of the northern Song dynasty, Di Qing, did not escape. Later, when Di Qing went to war, he basically wore a mask. What Lin Yuan wanted to do in the Endless Sea, he only needed to imitate Yang Su. After all, the Endless Sea was already very deformed. Even the almighty immortals could not directly change the Endless Sea. Therefore, Lin Yuan had to use this method to quickly cultivate a group of people who already benefited from it. He had to tell the demonic beasts in the Endless Sea that bloodline did not mean anything. Only with meritorious deeds could one get a reasonable reward. Firstly, these new nobles of the Endless Sea would quickly form a group headed by Lin Yuan to fight against those demonic beasts with dragon bloodlines who wanted to be superior in the Endless Sea purely based on their bloodline. Secondly, if there was such an interest group, Lin Yuan would quickly become a new nobleman in the Endless Sea, and he would be able to rope in more and more demonic beasts with dragon bloodlines to work for him. When this interest group formed, the demonic beasts with dragon bloodlines would try to divide the city of trade. At that time, it would depend on whether the Dragon King of the Endless Sea or the Dragon King of the Northern Frontier was more powerful. What's more, doing this could indeed change the deformed situation of the Endless Sea. As for whether they would be forced to retreat after they succeeded, perhaps the higher-ups of the demonic beasts with dragon bloodlines really thought so. However, to Lin Yuan, the wishful thinking of the higher-ups of the demonic beasts was as laughable as a child showing off his cleverness to an adult. The dragon race of the Four Seas had 6 dragon gods in the Tianwu world. Now 2 of them were dead and 1 was injured. However, even so, no demonic beast dared to touch those territories that had lost their masters. No matter what they did, once they reached a certain level of status, they were not existences that could be changed at will. It was just like how the emperor could not wait to eat their flesh and sleep on their skin. The emperor could only pinch his nose and persuade them again and again. If it really didn't work, the emperor could only put on an act and beg them to come back and be an official after a period of time. No matter how hateful these officials were, they were still an important part of the imperial court. Therefore, the emperor could only overthrow the officials. If the emperor casually laid his hands on the officials, the entire imperial court might collapse because of it. Moreover, with the special privilege of the Confucian school of thought, the emperor actually had no excuse to lay his hands on the officials. If they formed a new interest group according to Lin Yuan's idea, even if Lin Yuan didn't take on the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, he would still be an irreplaceable existence. This was because the abnormalities of the Endless Sea had not just happened in a day or two. Whether these demonic beasts who had gone from marginal status to nobility with great difficulty believed in Lin Yuan, the Dragon King who had brought them hope, or the Dragon King of the Four Seas who judged heroes based on their bloodline was obviously a question that didn't require much thought. Therefore, Lin Yuan's disdain for the methods of the Inhumans was not purely because the Inhumans had screwed up. Most of the time, a qualified political strategist would not introduce external forces to break the game. They would be able to do whatever they wanted on the existing chessboard to make themselves invincible or to become the final winner. If those methods of driving the wolf to devour the tiger and borrowing other forces were used in political tactics, they would basically be the last fight that could not be turned back. Those were the methods that only losers would use. However, some people would still think that these methods were brilliant and powerful. How could this not make people laugh? Even if he were in the position of the Inhumans, he would also find ways to cause a fight between the Dragon God Temple and the God Worship religion, instead of using the God Worship religion to kick them aside and then introducing the Heavenly Court to wrestle with the God Worship religion. He thought that he could win the game by doing this, but he had never thought that no matter in the eyes of any forces, he, the Inhumans, was a bad collaborator, a stinky fish that had to be kicked out. To put it bluntly, if he couldn't even play these chess pieces on the field, then he would continue to add more chess pieces to it. If he wasn't a fool, what else could he be? Chapter 1191. Time passed by bit by bit. Along with the cold that almost froze the Endless Sea, the endless disputes in the Endless Sea finally ushered in a short period of peace. At the same time, this also meant that Lin Yuan had been in this world for 4 years. During this period of time, Lin Yuan only stayed in the Endless Sea and did not meet with the higher-ups of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. However, he gathered a large number of capable dragon bloodline demonic beasts that were not valued because of their impure bloodline. Of course, there were also some demonic beasts that tried to make up the numbers and come under Lin Yuan. After all, under the lobbying of Jiao Wan and Cyrus, the City of Trade had become the largest trading platform in the Endless Sea. Who knew how many demonic beasts begged to find a job in the City of Trade? Moreover, the City of Trade was not just on the right track. The originally vast City of Trade had never placed goods from the northern frontier. After all, Lin Yuan, the northern frontier, and the City of Trade could not run away. The demonic beasts or cultivators that came to shop only needed to state what they needed at the counter and come to pick it up at the appointed time. Or the Sea Demon Guild's logistics team could deliver it to their doorstep. The vacated positions were naturally not idle. Therefore, under the guidance of Lin Yuan, Jiao Yi deliberately attracted a lot of caravans or individual investors to settle in the City of Trade. It was almost effortless for him to pull the City of Trade to a unique level. Its scope of influence was not even limited to a few sea areas. Due to the existence of the teleportation array and the logistics team, doing business with the City of Trade was almost no different from online shopping except for the fact that one had to personally place an order. Therefore, just like Lin Yuan's idea, the City of Trade defeated the markets of other sea areas effortlessly. Even the caravans that wandered around the Endless Sea areas had to give up their originally lucrative business and transport the specialties of their own sea areas to the City of Trade to sell. Today, Lin Yuan could almost be a hands-off shopkeeper because in this case, even if he did not sell any goods, just the rent from the demonic beasts rental shops and the 5% transaction tax after the transaction was completed was enough for him to make a lot of money. Moreover, Lin Yuan had an advantage that other sea demons could not compare to. With the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce as his backing, whether it was the storage of goods or the rare treasures that the endless sea demons could not get, it was a piece of cake for Lin Yuan. Just as Lin Yuan had expected, the City of Trade, which had officially started to make a profit, began to recover the losses of the northern frontier. The goods that were continuously sent from the Endless Sea to the northern frontier not only greatly relieved the financial pressure of the northern frontier, but it also relied on the unique marine phase and deep-sea mineral deposits in the Endless Sea to increase the profits of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce by leaps and bounds again. However, while Lin Yuan was happy, the other forces were not so happy. However, the dragon bloodline demonic beasts still had to rely on Lin Yuan to compete with the Outer Sea demons. Even if they were greedy, they did not dare to touch him. As for the Outer Sea demons, it was even more strange. On one hand, they were trading with the Northern Frontier or the City of Trade, and on the other hand they were fighting with the new interest groups under Lin Yuan's command. These Outer Sea demons were not lying when they hoped that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce would open in the coastal area. After all, although the Outer Sea demons were rich in all kinds of resources, the Outer Sea demons could not be compared with the Outer Sea demons. Therefore, in terms of foundation, the Outer Sea demons were much weaker. Now that they needed a lot of resources, how could they turn a blind eye to the City of Trade just because they wanted to support the enemy in the trade fair? However, the main point of this matter was that the Outer Sea demons only hoped that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce would open in the coastal and riverside areas. It did not mean that they could tolerate Lin Yuan building a city of trade in the Endless Sea and extending the influence of the Northern Frontier to the Endless Sea. Therefore, the Outer Sea demons' attitude toward Lin Yuan was still mostly anger and resentment. Of course, the most unhappy ones were the demonic beasts that took advantage of the current chaotic situation to run to Lin Yuan's command. They originally thought that even if they were not as good as the gray-scaled flood dragon person, a tribe that was related to Lin Yuan by blood, they would not be inferior to the brave crab tribe, right? In the end, Lin Yuan did not even look at these demonic beasts that were just there to make up the numbers. Basically, if they were really strong and had a big background, Lin Yuan would not even bother to speak to them. Compared to the brave crab tribe? Were they worthy? After Tai O joined, although he did not achieve a record of sweeping the Endless Sea for Lin Yuan, he could still be considered loyal and devoted. Moreover, he did not join the Northern Frontier after the Northern Frontier became powerful. Instead, when the Northern Frontier had just fallen out with the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas, he had already contacted the Northern Frontier. When the other forces were still watching, Tai O led his tribe to join the Northern Frontier. Just by casually jumping ship, they wanted to be compared to the brave crab tribe. Lin Yuan was not sure if other people could do such an anti-intellectual behavior, but he definitely could not do it. Moreover, these demonic beasts that were just there to make up the numbers did not even mix into the City of Trade until they died. Almost during the first and second missions, they were almost completely annihilated. Their own strength was one reason. However, most of them did not take Lin Yuan's task seriously at all. What would happen if they carried out a task that had a slim chance of survival with a playful mentality? Obviously, it was also a matter that did not need to be elaborated. After all, if Lin Yuan wanted to cultivate his own interest group, the first thing he had to do was to have enough merits. Otherwise, how could he find the higher-ups of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts and ask for a large number of benefits to reward these demonic beasts that were not valued because of their bloodline? Within a few months, it was needless to say how difficult and dangerous it was to make a contribution that even the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, who valued their bloodline, were speechless. However, these difficult missions also quickly made Lin Yuan have an irreplaceable position in the hearts of these new dignitaries. After all, they were the ones who personally experienced and even carried out these missions. Compared to Lin Yuan's command and the higher-ups of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, they were very clear in their hearts that if the commander was not Lin Yuan, they would definitely be dead. After becoming the new dignitaries of the Endless Sea, they could not betray their own class. On the contrary, they had to continue to shine and maintain their persona in order to seek better development. They could not let the Endless Sea return to the previous situation where heroes were judged by their bloodline, because in that case they would lose everything they had now, which was something they could not accept. But maintaining their persona also meant that they had to obey the command. Chapter 1192. If they obeyed Lin Yuan's command and carried out those dangerous missions, they would gain something regardless of whether they succeeded or failed. If they completed the mission, they would get a bigger territory and more resources. Even if they failed, their clan would get a generous pension. But to obey the command of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts? Forget it then. They were all demonic beasts that made a living in the Endless Sea, who didn't know each other's background. These new dignitaries were able to seize the general trend of the new era and become the new dignitaries of the Endless Sea. Naturally, they weren't fools. They knew clearly that no matter what kind of promise they made, they had already become a member of a huge new interest group. The dragon bloodline demonic beasts were used to being superior. It was impossible for them to watch such a big power fall into the hands of an existence other than themselves. Therefore, they would definitely stand out and compete with Lin Yuan for this power. However, who didn't know the temperament of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts aristocrats? It was also a mission with a slim chance of survival. If the mission was successful under the command of a dragon bloodline demon beast nobleman, the credit would basically go to the nobleman. Since they were the real adventurers, the nobleman was already kind enough to give them 1/10 of the reward. If they failed, they would naturally be the scapegoats. Not only would the species behind them not receive any compensation, they might even be ripped off. Therefore, during this period of time with the arrival of winter, the wind and clouds in the endless sea began to fade. However, the undercurrent in the hearts of the demonic beasts became more and more majestic. This was also the situation that Lin Yuan had expected from the beginning. No matter how nice the dragon bloodline demonic beasts sounded, when they saw the benefits that were within reach, they would still grab it regardless of the overall situation. It was the same logic as when there was a jujube but no jujube. If they didn't get a share of Lin Yuan's benefits, they would still plan for the next opportunity. If they got a share of the benefits, they would probably push Lin Yuan out of the endless sea. But in this case, these dragon bloodline demonic beasts would fall into the trap of this game. Plus, was fighting for the authority something Lin Yuan needed? Obviously not. He just wanted to make the endless sea more and more muddy, so that he and the gray-scaled flood dragon person could have a more stable footing. It would naturally be good if he could obtain the loyalty of this group of new interest groups. It would be quite beneficial for stabilizing his position, but it was only a benefit. Lin Yuan had never thought that he could really rely on these dragon bloodline demonic beasts. Simply put, Lin Yuan was able to form this interest group and get these dragon bloodline demonic beasts to work for him only because of benefits. However, if they could be loyal to him for benefits, they would definitely betray him for benefits. This was without a doubt. However, the current situation had already been set. There was already a rift between the new interest group and the original bloodline nobility clans. Although it couldn't compare to the deep hatred between the outer sea demonic beasts and the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, it still involved the interests of their own race. The dragon bloodline demonic beasts couldn't fall out with the interest group before dealing with the outer sea demonic beasts. Otherwise, once a conflict broke out, it wouldn't just be a tripartite confrontation. Instead, this new interest group would directly join forces with the outer sea demonic beasts and wipe out the so-called bloodline nobility clans. In addition, Lin Yuan's unshakable position in the new interest group meant that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts couldn't touch him at all. If they wanted to target Lin Yuan, they would have to deal with the interest group first. At this juncture, the existence of this interest group was their biggest trump card against the outer sea demonic beasts. Even if they had the ability to destroy it, they wouldn't really do so. The current relationship between the interest group and Lin Yuan can be described as unbreakable. If they fall out one day in the future, it must be because the interest group has become strong enough to compete with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and the Siren Guild. Of course, the higher-ups of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts wouldn't really destroy this interest group in a fit of rage. What did that have to do with Lin Yuan? This was just an internal conflict between the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. Lin Yuan could just wave his hand and leave the endless sea with the gray-scaled flood dragon person. When the dragon bloodline demonic beasts were destroyed by the outer sea demonic beasts, he estimated that the northern frontier would become an unshakable power in the Tianwu continent. At that time, it would be even easier to invade the endless sea. To the humans, the internal conflict between the demonic beasts was much more suitable than the northern frontier suppressing them. Not only would they not be a burden to Lin Yuan, but there might even be a group of existences that were scared out of their wits by the northern frontier that would fully support Lin Yuan's conquest of the endless sea. Fight? How could they fight? Lin Yuan wasn't a part of the situation at all. Although he had participated in this series of events, he would at most lose a few gray-scaled flood dragon people. Later on, he would grit his teeth and pay a large amount of incense power to create an even more prosperous empire of gray-scaled flood dragon people. However, regardless of the outcome of the arrangements in the endless sea, it wouldn't affect Lin Yuan's power in the northern frontier. Furthermore, the demonic beasts in the endless sea were strong. However, if they had the ability to kill Lin Yuan, it would be a fool's dream. Even if Lin Yuan were to stay in the endless sea and wait for them to kill him, they would have to ask Hanba, Hongyun, Luoyu and a series of other traders from the chaotic world if they were willing to do so. There were also those clowns from the heavenly court. Although Lin Yuan was challenging them on the surface, in the end this wasn't the desolate world. They weren't that strong. Just like how the Heavenly Gate Guardian had handed the trouble of the Sky Demon to Lin Yuan to deal with, those traders couldn't wait for Lin Yuan to deal with these immortals from the Heavenly Court. However, if Lin Yuan couldn't hold on, would the Heavenly Gate Guardian not personally deal with the Sky Demon? Or would these traitors, who had chosen to live in seclusion for some unknown reason, just watch as Hongjun extended his hand into the sky martial world? Lin Yuan was currently in a lot of trouble. However, at the end of the day, these troubles weren't his. He had only been pushed out to be a cannon. Now, if he said that he couldn't hold on anymore, he would just lie down and do nothing. Naturally, there would be someone to deal with these troubles. Lin Yuan didn't do that because there was still a ruthless force in his bones. In addition, there was the existence of this system. Sooner or later, he would have to face existences like Hongjun. If he didn't even dare to fight against Hongjun's minions, he would find a time to kill himself. Perhaps he would still have a complete corpse. The real trouble for Lin Yuan, other than those clowns who were causing trouble in the dark side of the northern frontier, was that the great era was coming. The three realms were about to be completed. The treasure that could threaten Hongjun was about to be born. Perhaps soon Lin Yuan would have to face ancestor Yang Mei, sect leader Tong Tian, Taoist Hong Yun, and the other powerful beings of the desolate world. Chapter 1193. In the City of Trade. Flood Dragon 1 stood in front of Lin Yuan with his hands down. There was a hint of tiredness in his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "Dragon King, I heard that the Qinwu continent is not very peaceful now. It is said that there are two experts in Buddhism and Taoism who have turned into demons. One of them is in the Withered Wood Empire. He claimed that he had seen a true immortal and was bestowed with immortal techniques. Now he calls himself God of Slaughter, and started a massacre in the Withered Wood Empire. The other one is a senior monk in Buddhism, known as the Living Buddha, Great Master Fa Cheng." It paused here as if it was recalling something before it added, "Master Fa Cheng also claimed that he met a Buddha from the western Pure Land of ultimate bliss and was bestowed with supreme Dharma. Soon after, Master Fa Cheng set off alone for the Withered Wood dynasty, where the sects flourished the most, to discuss Dharma with the Buddhists there. However, on the day he arrived at the capital of the Withered Wood dynasty, someone discovered that Master Fa Cheng originated from a guest room in the largest glazed tile temple there. It was said that he died in an extremely strange manner. Half of his face was benevolent, while the other half was filled with resentment and hostility." Interesting. Go on. Lin Yuan raised his eyes slightly and looked at Flood Dragon 1 carefully. It seemed that this matter had caused quite a stir. Otherwise, even the cities that traded with the Sky Martial continent would not have received such news. However, Flood Dragon 1 had specially mentioned it, which meant that the repercussions of these two matters were not small. In fact, it could even threaten the northern region. After a moment of silence, Flood Dragon 1 continued. "After Great Master Fa Cheng died, some people said that the glazed tile temple coveted the supreme Dharma and killed Great Master Fa Cheng to steal the scripture. Some people said that Great Master Fa Cheng had died long ago. According to the autopsy, Great Master Fa Cheng was already dead before he left." A bright light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes. He claimed that he had seen a Buddha from the western Pure Land and was bestowed with supreme Dharma. However, he died mysteriously before he left. In other words, if there was no problem with the autopsy, it meant that a corpse had walked from the temple to the Withered Wood Empire. Along the way he had seen many demonic beasts and cultivators. He even met with the senior monks of the Withered Wood Empire and was arranged to rest in a guest room before he died? Interesting. Very interesting. This was already related to his job. Moreover, of all places, why did Master Fa Cheng have to die in the Deadwood dynasty? Was this related to the exalted celestial venerable of slaughter and salvation, who had also seen a true immortal? Then why didn't Empyrean venerable Pudu die? Instead, he went on a killing spree in the Withered Wood dynasty and no one dared to touch him? Although Lin Yuan was not a schemer, he did not doubt that the autopsy results would be problematic. After all, Master Fa Cheng was quite famous. He was a Dao initiation realm cultivator. In the current Tianwu continent, he could be considered an immortal. He was not someone that Kongming and Tiangang dared to provoke. In addition, he had the backing of Buddhism. Even the guardians of the Heavenly Gate did not dare to touch Master Fa Cheng. A small glazed temple did not have the ability or the guts to do so. Moreover, this matter would directly affect the relationship between the Withered Wood Empire and Buddhism. Therefore, those who participated in the investigation were definitely the elites of the Withered Wood Empire. Since they had given out the results of the autopsy, it could only mean that this was the truth. They were not afraid of anyone finding fault with them at all. Otherwise, they would definitely wipe out the glazed tile temple directly instead of shielding them. Even if they coveted the supreme Dharma that Grandmaster Fa Cheng had brought over, they would not have shielded him. To be more precise, if they coveted the Dharma, they would have directly destroyed the glazed tile temple to silence them and cut off all clues. That way, even Buddhism could only investigate secretly and could not fall out with the Withered Wood Empire directly. Someone went to the temple where Master Fa Cheng had cultivated and found that there were corpses everywhere. According to the register, all the monks in the temple except for Master Fa Cheng were dead. However, the strange thing was that these corpses did not have a heartbeat, pulse, or aura. They were no different from ordinary people. They even maintained the movements they had when they were alive. This was also the reason why no one discovered them after all the monks in the temple died. If they had not investigated Master Fa Cheng's strange death, who knows when they would have been discovered. The embroidered uniform guards received information that the monks were holding all kinds of weapons and scriptures. Many of them had expressions of fear and anger on their faces. Therefore, it can be inferred that these monks were subduing the demon before they died. However, the demon's abilities were far beyond their imagination. Therefore, not only did they fail to subdue the demon, they were completely wiped out. All the monks died, including some who had rushed back to the temple after receiving the news. As First Flood Dragon spoke, he sucked in a breath of cold air. Master Fa Cheng was an eminent monk of Buddhism. He did not usually live on the Tianwu continent, but cultivated in a temple built on an immortal island overseas. Apart from the servants who did not have the aptitude for cultivation, the disciples in the temple were mostly the new generation of disciples who came out to travel. A temple that could cultivate Dao initiation realm cultivators obviously did not only have Master Fa Cheng alone. After all, Master Fa Cheng was not an abbot or an abbot. He was just an old monk with a higher seniority. To be able to silently destroy such a temple, how terrifying was the power of the demon? Cultivators above the Kongming realm would probably break out in cold sweat just thinking about it. This king knows about this. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and said calmly, "Don't wait for the next transfer of goods. Contact the northern frontier directly and have them pay close attention to this matter." This king has a feeling that Master Fa Cheng is definitely not simple. Coupled with the existence of the exalted celestial lord of slaughter, the Withered Wood dynasty will definitely not be peaceful in the following period of time. Also, keep an eye on the temple where Master Fa Cheng came from. This king estimates that the corpses will not remain corpses forever. I'm afraid that there will be some kind of disaster. At this point, Lin Yuan took a deep breath. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and his voice carried a hint of killing intent. Tell the Demon Emperor Council to start working. During this period of time, if anyone within sight of the northern frontier claims to have seen a true immortal, or Buddha, there is no need to observe. Regardless of whether it's true or not, kill them on the spot. This king does not wish for the northern frontier to be involved in this storm. Understand? Yes. First Flood Dragon nodded heavily and replied, "I'll do it right away." As the king of the gray-scaled Flood Dragon people, Lin Yuan had always respected First Flood Dragon. It was rare for him to use such a commanding tone. However, once he used such a tone, it meant that the matter was extremely serious and had to be done immediately. Chapter 1194. 2 hours later. Jiao Yi returned to the main hall where Lin Yuan was with an anxious look on his face. "Dragon King, something has happened," Jiao Yi said in a panicked voice with a grave expression. "When I contacted the northern frontier, the embroidered uniform guard sent me the latest news. Master Fa Cheng's corpse has come back to life. He was holding a funeral in the capital of the Deadwood dynasty." Master Fa Cheng, who was holding a funeral, suddenly kicked open the coffin and sat up. He was full of murderous aura and corpse aura, and he started a massacre at the funeral. All the high-level members of the Deadwood dynasty sects and the eminent monks of Buddhism who rushed over after hearing the news died at the hands of Master Fa Cheng. Moreover, according to the news from the Deadwood dynasty, Master Fa Cheng now calls himself the Cleansing Buddha, and has set up his own sect. He has gathered many evil cultivators and demonic cultivators. He and Heavenly Lord Pudu, who killed all lives, started a massacre in the Deadwood dynasty. Heavenly Lord Pudu, who killed all lives. Cleansing Buddha? Hearing this, Lin Yuan's thoughts raced, and a grave expression appeared in his eyes. After all, the titles of these two fellows did not sound good. Moreover, their actions made them seem like genuine demonic cultivators. Lin Yuan knew of a similar existence. The Nether River Patriarch in the Eldritch world was such an existence. He was known as the Killer of Heaven, Killer of Earth, and Killer of all lives. Compared to the cultivation methods of the Eldritch world, the Nether River Patriarch was undoubtedly an anomaly. However, this method of achieving Tao was more difficult. After all, if he wanted to become a saint of the Great Path, he had to kill all living beings in the world. The Nether River Patriarch appeared very early. It could be said that he had participated in the era of the Eldritch World's Almighties. Achieving Tao through killing in that kind of environment? Not to mention top-notch mighty figures like Patriarch Yang Mei and Patriarch Hongjun, a Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva could directly crush him to death. However, with Patriarch Yang Mei guarding outside the Qianwu world and the rare treasure about to appear, Taoist Red Cloud and Tong Tian would not allow Patriarch Nether River to interfere at this time. Therefore, the possibility of Patriarch Nether River bewitching them was not high. Clearly, he was not the true immortal and Buddha that the heavenly venerate of slaughter and world-cleansing Buddha had mentioned. As for Hongjun, the old man was probably full of shit now. He had arranged for Bygone GFA Mosquito Daoran Generals Hung and Ha to possess the Tianwu world. Otherwise, the Grand Supreme would not have become a saint of the Great Path right under his nose. If he still had the energy to meddle in other people's business, he would have been killed by Hongjun when the Grand Supreme destroyed his own saint of the heavenly path. Who else could it be, attacking the Withered Wood dynasty at such a time? All of a sudden Lin Yuan's face darkened. Someone was trying to sabotage him. Li Zhong had been carrying out the grand strategic plan he had deployed before. He did not even pay attention to the southern wasteland demon vein that was causing trouble. After eliminating all the possibilities, the remaining answer was obvious. Almost all the schemers would think that this was all planned by Lin Yuan. In addition, Lin Yuan had shown the power of the system before. At that time he had even killed many demon beasts in the Endless Sea. Therefore Lin Yuan was completely capable of creating true immortals and Buddhas. The northern frontier and the Withered Wood dynasty were still at the stage of border friction. It was not even a prelude, let alone a great war. At most it was just a prelude. However, when the heavenly venerate of slaughter and world-cleansing Buddha appeared, the situation changed completely. If Lin Yuan did not know that he was just an onlooker, he would have suspected that the northern frontier was trying to sabotage the Withered Wood dynasty. Mother asterisk Kerr, Lin Yuan's blue-white eyes were overflowing with coldness. He cursed, "You dare to sabotage me? When I have the chance I will let you know what regret is." This kind of power that obviously did not belong to the Sky Martial world had appeared and was obviously targeting him. Lin Yuan did not even need to think to know that it was the Heavenly Court's group behind this. He estimated that the battle between them and the God-worshipping religion was almost over. Moreover, it seemed that the Heavenly Court had the upper hand. When the winter ended, the Outer Sea demon beasts would continue to send troops to deal with the dragon bloodline demon beasts. The purpose of this kind of thing at this time was to make the northern frontier be attacked from both sides. It would be even better if they could transfer Lin Yuan away from the Endless Sea. After all, during this period of time, Lin Yuan had commanded the new interest groups and made the Outer Sea demon beasts suffer a lot. However, even if those ambitious people suspected Lin Yuan, it was only a suspicion. Next, someone had to provide solid evidence to prove that this matter was caused by Lin Yuan. Otherwise, the northern frontier would not be in such a state of being attacked from both sides. After thinking for a while, Lin Yuan said to Jiao Wan with a gloomy face, "Let Li Zhong keep a close eye on the Jiao clan. Also, let the Demon Emperor Association follow the evidence I left behind and quickly catch Zhang Xiu, Luo Su, Lei Fan and the others. Make it so detailed that they chewed a mouthful of rice several times. Once there is any strange movement, immediately arrange for the Blackwater Army to surround and kill them. No matter how many people die, make sure they can't do anything. Understand? Also, keep a close eye on Lei Qiuxing. I would rather kill the wrong person than let him go." Thinking about this, Lin Yuan felt a headache coming on. Now that there were too many talents gathered in the northern frontier, the problems that came with it were more and more. For example, the number of ambitious people in the northern frontier was constantly increasing. At the start, there was only Lei Fan. Later on, Jiao Wuing, Lei Qiuxing, and the others were just representatives. At this time, if anyone were to stab the northern frontier, they would be able to take over the Withered Wood Empire's territory and resources. Who knew how many people would be eager to try? Fortunately, the northern frontier still had the Demon Emperor Association, Imperial Secret Service, Yi Busho, and other secret service organizations. This allowed Lin Yuan to keep a close eye on these people. After giving such an order, Li Zhong would probably understand what he meant. At least for a short period of time, there would not be any obvious evidence that could be used against them in the northern frontier. This matter was not done by the northern frontier. Even if there was any evidence, it would be a false accusation. Damn it. He originally wanted to gnaw on the Withered Wood Empire, which was a tough bone to chew. He wanted to reduce the northern frontier's threat to the other factions by a large margin. When chaos arrived, he wanted to ensure that the northern frontier would not be kicked out prematurely. He wanted to preserve the strength to compete with the other empires. But what was going on now? First, he created 2 great demons to go on a rampage in the Withered Wood Empire for a while. Then, he waved his hand and ordered the northern frontier's army to set off and easily take over the Withered Wood Empire's territory? Wasn't this forcing the other empires to work together to deal with the northern frontier? Such a lame method. I'm afraid they are going to compete? At Literati Star. Lin Yuan took a deep breath. His eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. Chapter 1195. What Lin Yuan didn't know was that, in the Shiqi dynasty on the other side of the Tianwu continent, GFA, who was wearing a white dragon-embroidered robe, overturned all the books on the table in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot. It was not too late for him to hear about what happened in the Withered Wood dynasty. After all, Shiqi also had the Phoenix Cry Guards. Although they were not as good as the northern region in terms of internal and external monitoring, none of the major events in the Tianwu continent could be hidden from the eyes of the Phoenix Cry Guards. Just like when Xian conquered the south and expanded his territory by more than 10 times, he only brought the old, weak, sick, disabled, and slaves back to the dynasty. Shiqi was the first to react and raise the banner to suppress the vassals of the Shang dynasty. If it weren't for the Phoenix Guards and the traitors of the Shang dynasty, even if Ji Chang and GFA were really wise, they wouldn't dare to directly challenge the ruler of the world at that time. Because doing so wouldn't be bravely challenging the evil dragon, but foolishly leading the whole family to die together. The appearance of the killer Pudu Tianzuan and the cleansing Buddha was obviously not the work of the Black Jiao. After all, GFA came to the Tianwu world many years earlier than Lin Yuan and had been secretly plotting and scheming. The only thing related to the untainted world was the name of the dynasty, Shiqi. But the world only remembered the glory of the great Zhou dynasty for 800 years. If it wasn't for the investiture of the gods, who would care about the Shiqi of the Phoenix Cry Shiqi? If the mortals didn't care, those high and mighty immortals wouldn't care. The more GFA observed the Black Jiao, the more he felt the terror of this opponent. Even when he was at an absolute disadvantage, the Black Flood Dragon still dared to go all out. In the end, he managed to establish a great foundation in the Northern Territory. He was also good at using the good and evil of human nature to control the many top-notch talents in the Northern Territory. He was top-notch in terms of strategy, wisdom, and even military accomplishments. His personality could be said to be steady without losing his boldness. If the Black Flood Dragon was not a demonic beast, GFA did not doubt that the other party would definitely be a human king. Thus, the matter of the Withered Wood dynasty most likely had nothing to do with the Black Serpent, because this matter was done too crudely. And it was too crude to use this matter to attack the Black Jiao and the northern frontier. Motherf *Ker. Wen Xing? I really overestimated you back then. GFA's handsome facial features were almost twisted together. His face was ashen as if he had just lost his loved one. While panting like a wild beast, GFA hissed, "Inform the spies we arranged in the northern frontier to evacuate as soon as possible. If they're already targeted, then don't move. No matter what happens in the outside world, they're not allowed to do anything before receiving my orders." Without a doubt, it was definitely Baigan who planned the matter of the Withered Wood dynasty. To the natives of the Sky Martial world, this might be a good move. After all, there were many existences in the Sky Martial world. They couldn't accurately distinguish the difference between the Heavenly Court and Lin Yuan, but they could still see that this power didn't belong to the Sky Martial world. In addition, the northern frontier was the enemy of the Withered Wood dynasty. It wasn't strange for them to suspect the Black Jiao. However, the Black Jiao wasn't completely ignorant of the Sky Martial world. If he could follow this train of thought and link it to the Heavenly Court and Baigan, that Black Flood Dragon would definitely not take the blame. Therefore, in the following period of time, the northern region would probably usher in another incomparably cruel massacre. After all, the natives of the Sky Martial world only suspected the northern frontier and the Black Jiao. In order to confirm this matter, someone had to stand up and give the other powers a suitable excuse to prove that the northern frontier was the mastermind. Therefore, to the Black Jiao, the easiest way to solve the current situation was to deal with all changes by sticking to the status quo. As long as the northern frontier didn't do anything, the other powers would only stop suspecting the northern frontier. In fact, if the northern frontier turned to do other things and the Withered Wood dynasty was heavily damaged, the other dynasties might set their eyes on the Withered Wood dynasty's territory. At that time, when the various powers fought, it would actually help the northern frontier. Just as he had thought, this job was done too crudely. If Baigan hadn't taken the initiative to discuss this matter with him, killing the Buddha and the Black Jiao wouldn't have been able to directly kill the northern frontier and the Black Jiao, but it would definitely have been able to severely injure them. It wouldn't have been like now. As long as the Black Jiao could withstand the current pressure, it would have helped the northern frontier to clean up the internal disharmony. Just like in the past, Baigan and his elder brother, who was born with a good appearance but had no shrewdness, tried to seduce Daji, who was DXIN's virtuous helper. However, not only did they not get the result they deserved, but they also made DXIN suspicious. As a result, Shichi was not prepared to launch an attack. If it weren't for the help of the Rin school and the Chan school, they would have been killed by DXIN. If he had done the same thing, he would never have tried to seduce Daji. Instead, he would have used the many traitors in the Yinshang dynasty to tarnish Daji's reputation first, and then let the important ministers denounce Daji. In this way, even if DXIN knew that Daji was innocent, he had to remove Daji from the decision-making for the stability of the country. In an instant, DXN lost a great general, and he wouldn't get himself into trouble. To put it bluntly, Baigan coveted the political power that Daji represented, and his elder brother, who was made into meat soup, coveted Daji's beauty. The chemical effect of a lousy politician meeting a straw bag almost destroyed Shichi. Even if Shichi's reaction was fast, the eldest son of the Ji family couldn't escape the misfortune. The sage's body that his father had built for his whole life was also broken. Even if Yinshang was defeated, it didn't help. In the end, his father died of depression, leaving him a mess. Even the posthumous title of King Wen of Zhou was given to him by GFA after the destruction of Yinshang. After so many years, this Wen Chuxing didn't make any progress at all. No wonder he was a loser all his life. It was precisely because GFA knew the true level of Baigan's heart of 7 orifices that he did not care about Baigan's face and warned him. He did not expect Baigan to still do things his own way. While maintaining the cooperation with him, he also gave He Jiao a blow. Once again, he played a good hand of cards to pieces. Every time he thought of the past, GFA would tremble with anger, and this time was no exception. Even at this time, he calculated the old and new debts together. GFA's hatred and disgust for Baigan were no less than Lin Yuan's. Chapter 1196. In the Northern Frontier King's Mansion. After receiving Lin Yuan's instructions from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, Li Zhong's expression turned serious. He had no idea what had happened, but at the very least, close to 1 million cultivators had died in the Withered Wood Empire. Countless mortals had been dragged into the matter as well. If the two were added together, close to 100 million people would have died in just a few days. But to be honest, Li Zhong didn't take the Withered Wood dynasty's matter to heart. After all, the northern frontier itself was full of trouble, and he didn't have the time to care about other forces. Moreover, the 2 demons that had started a massacre in the Withered Wood dynasty were obviously not ordinary cultivators, and even Dao Initiation Realm cultivators had been killed. Unless the Dragon King personally faced the 2 demons in the northern frontier, once they left the northern frontier and lost the blessing of the northern frontier, Batu and Kagura wouldn't be their opponents. Naturally, they didn't have the qualifications to meddle in other people's business, so this trouble would be left to the Heavenly Gate Guardian to deal with. But Li Zhong didn't expect the Withered Wood dynasty's matter to be so big that even the Dragon King had sent back instructions. Li Zhong was terrified as he thought about it, and a thin layer of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. After all, the Dragon King was very casual. Although he saw everything, he didn't ask about it whether it was good or bad. In these few months, he had really handed the huge northern frontier to him. Even if he purposely made some wrong decisions to test the waters, the Dragon King would at most give him a few words of advice, but he definitely wouldn't interfere with his decisions. Good Lord, he didn't even care about his own family's matters, but he was so concerned about his enemies' matters? However, this also indirectly proved that there was definitely a very deep water behind what happened in the Withered Tree dynasty. In fact, if the northern region continued to maintain this attitude of not caring about the matter and not caring about it, trouble would probably come to the northern region very soon. Lei Fan Luo Su, Zhang Xiu Lei Qiuxing? Li Zhong rubbed his chin and fell into deep thought. He murmured, "What do these people have in common? They are all from the royal family. They are traitors, ambitious people? Does the Dragon King want me to keep an eye on the 4 of them, or on all the ambitious schemers?" Li Zhong would have just waved his hand if he had only targeted the few names that Lin Yuan had mentioned. However, there were too many ambitious schemers in the northern frontier, including Li Zhong himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have staked his future on the northern frontier when he had nothing in the northern frontier. It was obviously impossible to completely target all the ambitious schemers. Even if he could smoothly pass the order to the various spy agencies, without enough manpower, he wouldn't be able to achieve perfect results. However, to make a move against the Witherwood dynasty at this moment, this kind of action was no different from helping the northern frontier send out obstacles. No power would do such a stupid thing. So, although the mastermind behind the Witherwood dynasty was someone else, the cultivation world of the Sky Marshal world subconsciously suspected that this matter was done by our northern frontier? Li Zhong's expression gradually became gloomy. He murmured, "No matter whether the northern frontier did this or not, as long as a member of the northern frontier came out to take over the Witherwood dynasty, this black pot would be directly placed on our northern frontier's head." Now what a good plan. So, is this what the Dragon King meant? Or is there another deeper meaning? Li Zhong suddenly missed his arrogant younger brother. If Li Xan was at the northern frontier, he would have most likely guessed the Dragon King's intention. He could only scratch his head and continue to think. After confirming that he didn't miss anything, he could then arrange the operation. At the same time, in the endless sea, Lin Yuan was sitting cross-legged in his palace. A hint of coldness flashed through his blue and white eyes. After a while, Lin Yuan slowly raised his head. His gaze swept outside the palace and he said in a deep voice, "Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign is here. This junior's humble abode is immediately illuminated by your presence." Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign, who appeared, coldly snorted. He swung his sleeve and said snappily, "If you don't know how to flatter, then don't. Who would be like you, saying this kind of words with a face full of killing intent?" Lin Yuan tilted his head and said with a faint smile, "If this junior's face is really full of killing intent, it can only mean that senior came to find me personally for no good reason. This junior is just showing his emotions on the surface." Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign cast a sidelong glance at Lin Yuan and said expressionlessly, "You're right. This time I didn't find you for any good reason. It's just that I was entrusted by someone, so I specially came to the Endless Sea to send you a message. I'm afraid that you will have to interfere in the Witherwood dynasty's matter even if you don't care." Lin Yuan? After a short moment of astonishment, Lin Yuan asked dumbfoundedly, "This? What do you mean?" Although the Witherwood dynasty's matter was originally a trap set for him, this work was really too rough. As long as he managed the ambitious people in the northern frontier well and didn't take up this task no matter what, the other party would be shooting himself in the foot. This time he might have to help the northern frontier get rid of many spies from other forces. Do you really think that Baigon's incense for so many years is for nothing? Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign rolled his eyes and casually pulled a chair to sit down. He said in a deep voice, "This work is really rough. But if you can think of the loopholes, Baigon himself naturally can think of it too. So he also considered what to do if you don't take up the task. Although he hasn't shown it on the surface, according to my investigation, I'm afraid that this time Baigon is going to trigger the Netherworld." Lin Yuan? For some reason Lin Yuan felt that Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign was fooling him. Trigger the Netherworld? Does the Netherworld really exist in the Tianwu world? Oh, I guess that you would have such an expression. Otherwise, why don't you say that you guys are existences from the ancient times and have good abilities in all aspects but lack all kinds of common knowledge? Do you really think that the Netherworld is the Netherworld and that it will only appear after opening up a tunnel and patching up the three realms? Then can you explain to me why there were already savage places like the Netherworld Blood Sea and the Untainted World before the Heavenly Court and the Underworld were built? Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign sat upright on the chair and said with a cold smile, "The so-called Netherworld exists in every world. But before the world was patched up, the Netherworld and the human world were connected. After the Underworld was built, the evil spirits in this world had a new home and slowly decreased. The so-called Netherworld is actually just a place to store negative energy. After a long time, these negative emotions will distort some space and form the so-called Netherworld impasse, such as the Netherworld Blood Sea and Fengdu Ancient City." Chapter 1197. Before the establishment of the Underworld, the Netherworld was connected to the human world. Lin Yuan did not deny this point. Before the establishment of the three underworlds, the human world could be said to be filled with demons and ghosts. East Peak, Mount Tai and Fengdu could be considered as the disaster areas. Therefore the establishment of Mount Tai and Fengdu Underworld was mainly to suppress these two ghost caves. The Underworld was established by Buddhism. For merit and incense, it took the initiative to go to the human world to capture wandering souls and send them into the cycle of reincarnation. However, they were only wandering souls and ghosts. Generally speaking, the netherworld would avoid even the slightest bit of powerful existences. For example, zombies without souls could not be dealt with by the envoys of hell who could only capture and strike souls. Therefore they simply ignored them. If zombies appeared anywhere, the local chi practitioners would be the ones to deal with them. As for the more powerful ones that could be dealt with by mortal power, they were directly handed over to the thunder gods of the heaven court. However, what did this have to do with Lin Yuan? Could it be that if he did not care about the Withered Tree Empire, the three realms could not be repaired? Although Bai Gan had planned all of this, he was probably the only one who did not know what level he was at. Therefore, it was really unknown whether he could see the problems in his plan that was full of loopholes. You see, I told you that you wouldn't take my words seriously. You thought that I was just trying to be tactful with you, didn't you? Shangqing Heavenly Lord narrowed his eyes and smiled as he waved his hand and said, "Let me put it this way. Before Bai Gan took action, he first went to Hamba. In the name of a visit, he stole a trace of Hamba's original corpse energy. It was nothing to Hamba, but if this trace of corpse energy were to flow into the human world, I'm afraid it would instantly cause a huge disaster." Lin Yuan's gaze became dull. As long as it was a legend about zombies, no matter which version it was, Hamba was an ancestor-level existence. If Hamba's original corpse energy were to infect the human world, it was afraid that it would instantly turn an empire into a ghost world where zombies ran rampant. At most, only a small number of top cultivators or people with great luck would be able to survive. However, how did Bai Gan have the guts to provoke Hitorigami? Although Hongjun also had the bloodline of the human king, he was many generations inferior to the primogenitor. If this matter was blown out of proportion, even if Hamba couldn't kill the investiture of the gods in the Tianwu world, once this matter spread to the untainted world, any of the three sovereigns of the Red Cloud Cave would come out and kill a puny person. The heavenly court wouldn't have the guts to refuse, and Hongjun wouldn't fall out with the three sovereigns of the human race at this time. In any case, from Lin Yuan's point of view, Bai Gan was on a path of no return. However, compared to courting death, this matter was indeed a big deal. When he thought up to here, Lin Yuan's expression turned solemn, and he said in a low voice, "What you mean is that if I don't take over the Deadwood dynasty, then he's prepared to create a land of death that's filled with zombies to disgust me? It's even more serious than that." Shangqing Tianzuan narrowed his eyes slightly as if he thought of something interesting and said in a low voice, "If it's only a native of the Tianwu world, then it's really possible for him to do such a thing. However, Bai Gan is different. In any case, he's the literate star of the untainted heavenly court, an immortal who has seen the world. So, if he wants to do such a thing, he'll definitely choose to do it when the world is restored. At that time, the Deadwood dynasty will turn into a ghost region." Hearing this, Lin Yuan's expression immediately changed as if he had swallowed a fly. To be honest, the things that Bai Gan did didn't cause too much trouble, but they were extremely disgusting. If the Deadwood dynasty was classified as the Netherworld, then Lin Yuan, the god of the underworld, would have no choice but to hand it over. However, if at that time the Netherworld was filled with zombies, then even if Lin Yuan established the 6 paths of reincarnation, there would probably be countless ghost heroes who didn't want to be reincarnated. After all, there couldn't be any troublemakers. If there was one that couldn't be dealt with, then it would be like chives popping up one after another. As for zombies, it was indeed not something that the current Lin Yuan could casually deal with. Not to mention the other party was a zombie that was infected by the corpse chi of the drought demon. He didn't dare to say that once a zombie transformed, it would become a great zombie king at the level of the unmetamorphosed skeleton, but it would definitely be at the level of a flying zombie. In addition, zombies didn't have a soul in the first place, and their bodies were incomparably tough. Once they reached a higher level, they would be harder to deal with. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and said with a serious expression, "You mean I have to take over this matter? It's fine if you don't want to take it. I'm not forcing you. Anyway, I've already passed on the message. If you don't take it seriously, it has nothing to do with me." Shangqing Skylord smiled indifferently, then he stood up and walked out of the hall. After a while, he had disappeared without a trace. The hall once again returned to its loneliness. Lin Yuan then calmed down and began to think seriously. The trouble of the Deadwood dynasty was really troublesome. After all, things like Heavenly Venerate Skylord and Purifying World Buddha sounded very troublesome. In Lin Yuan's previous life, he had only heard of the White Lotus Society's Ajati matriarch, so he was very clear that these things were extremely troublesome. Moreover, he had to face their original bodies now. However, if he left them alone, the trouble would obviously become even bigger. After all, These two strange fellows were obviously much easier to deal with than the Deadwood dynasty that had fallen into a zombie kingdom. However, the problem was that the Heavenly Court and the Outer Sea demonic beasts couldn't wait for Lin Yuan to leave the Endless Sea. Without this terrifying opponent, they would be able to plan their next attack against the Dragon Bloodline demonic beast. Therefore Lin Yuan definitely couldn't leave. Otherwise, when Lin Yuan returned next time, not to mention the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts, even the City of Trade might be razed to the ground. However, if his original body couldn't leave the Endless Sea, the trouble of the Deadwood dynasty couldn't be solved by just anyone. They couldn't let the Northern Frontier Army enter the Deadwood dynasty wantonly to search, right? Then they probably wouldn't wait for the Heavenly Court to be repaired. They would probably directly release the original corpse gas of Hitorigami. Not only would the Deadwood dynasty turn into corpses, but even the Northern Frontier Army that Lin Yuan sent in wouldn't be able to survive. After thinking for a while, Lin Yuan silently contacted Jiao Yi with his divine thoughts and said in a deep voice, "Go and tell the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and tell Li Zhong to go to the back mountain of the Northern Frontier Academy to invite Qin Fang. No matter what Heavenly Venerate Skylord and Purifying World Buddha are, I don't think there's anyone more suitable than this great scholar to deal with these demons and monsters. Even if they see a true immortal and Buddha in person, they won't be able to gain any advantage against the great righteousness." Chapter 1198. The Howren Yard of the Northern Frontier Academy could be said to be the most popular branch. After all, after entering the Howren Yard, one could at least be assigned a gathering place of about 350,000 people as his territory after graduation. After all, the cultivation methods of the Howren Yard were divided into self-cultivation, family unification, governance, and world peace. When in the academy, one had to cultivate self-cultivation, family unification, and cultivate the Great Spirit. Even if one had no cultivation, evil spirits and monsters could not hurt a Confucian scholar. After graduation, one had to begin to cultivate the way of governance, which was to govern a place. The more prosperous the place was, the more the Confucian scholar's cultivation would begin to improve. However, the unique transfer system of the Northern Frontier was still maintained. Firstly, it was to maintain the competitiveness among the Confucian scholars. The more outstanding one's achievements were, the better the place he would be assigned after his term ended. Then, the speed of cultivation would be further increased. Ordinary achievements would be transferred to a place of similar status. If one was idle during his term, he would be transferred to a poorer place. If there was no progress, he would directly enter the elimination of the weak stage. Secondly, it was to ensure that while the Northern Frontier flourished, there would not be one country within a country. After all, although a 6-year term was not long and was insignificant in the long life of a cultivator, there were so many people in the Northern Frontier. Most of the Confucian scholars might not be transferred back to the gathering place where they first served for half of their lives in the Northern Frontier. Moreover, every Howren Yard disciple would constantly fade the imprint left by the previous one during his term, ensuring that the Northern Frontier would follow the command of Shunning City instead of becoming a separatist vassal state. However, although the disciples who entered Howran Courtyard were not few, those who walked out alive were not many. And most of these disciples who came out alive were in the self-cultivation realm or the family unification realm. Only Qin Fang had become a quasi-sage when he was studying in the Howren Yard. In other words, although he had not yet begun to cultivate the way of governance, he had already made 7 recommendations and 31 policies to improve various aspects of the Northern Frontier when he was in the Howren Yard. There were pros and cons, but most of the contents were adopted and highly approved by Li Zhong. In other words, when Qin Fang was studying in Howren Courtyard, he had already completed the accumulation of the stage of governing a country. However, there were pros and cons in this. It didn't mean that Qin Fang had some problems, but rather that there was a problem with his own theory. The Northern Frontier was currently governed by the Northern Frontier's laws. Other than Lin Yuan, there was no existence above the Northern Frontier's laws. Even Lin Yuan himself wouldn't attempt to violate the Northern Frontier's laws unless it was absolutely necessary. However, this typical rule by law was what the Confucians disliked the most. Even if Qin Fang hit the nail on the head with many of his problems, Li Zhong didn't adopt all of them. Instead, he adopted all the policies that negated the provisions of the laws. If Qin Fang completed, establishing a heart for heaven and earth, establishing a life for the people, inheriting the lost knowledge for the past sages, and establishing peace for all ages, he would become a sage. Whether it was cultivating both civil and martial arts to become an unparalleled Confucian general, or using literature to move the world and establish order for the northern frontier, Qin Fang would be at the peak of quasi-sage and wouldn't be inferior to the top cultivators in the Tianwu world. Even in the untainted world, he would be at the beginning of the golden immortal realm. If he could complete both and influence enough people, Qin Fang might even directly become a sage and be conferred the title of a Confucian sage. He would be an existence that could compete with Chaos Daluo. However, such a person had been placed in the Northern Frontier Academy by Lin Yuan to teach the disciples of the Howren Yard. It wasn't that Lin Yuan didn't know that Qin Fang was a talent, but that he was afraid of Qin Fang. After all, the Confucianism of the northern region was completely different from the Confucianism of the Tianwu world. It was a mixture of the essence of the Confucianism of Lin Yuan's previous life. After abandoning the behavior of the Confucianism of the northern region, which required others to follow the teachings of the Confucian sage, the style of the Confucianism of the northern region was several levels higher. The Confucianism of the northern region could really achieve the existence of everyone is responsible for the prosperity of the world. However, the Confucians, Lin Yuan really didn't know how to evaluate them. The Confucians had produced many sages and great people, but during the spring and autumn period and the warring states period, it was an indisputable fact that whoever used the Confucians would perish. After all, the Confucians believed that human nature was inherently good, and they wanted to replace the rule of law with the rule of man. In other words, the Confucians only believed in human nature, but any intelligent creature had a deep-rooted evil nature. Compared to the Confucians, Lin Yuan was closer to the legalists, saying that human nature was inherently evil. The disciples of the Confucians had always been a double-edged sword. If used well, the world would be peaceful, but if there was a problem, the Confucians would give birth to countless existences that could cause chaos in the world. After all, not everyone could become a sage, and even less everyone wanted to become a sage. In addition, the existence of Qin Fang has a great restraining effect on demons and monsters, and Lin Yuan is obviously one of them. If Qin Fang left the Howren courtyard to do as he pleased, Lin Yuan guessed that he might one day suffer a setback because of Qin Fang. However, the problem was that Lin Yuan had already been forced to this point. He had to either leave the Endless Sea and go to the Withered Wood dynasty to meet the Heavenly Court's Pudu Exalted Celestial and the Cleansing World Buddha, or he had to let Qin Fang go to the Withered Wood dynasty. At that time, the two tigers would fight and there would be an opportunity for the northern frontier. However, everything had to be done quickly, or he would have to face either a zombie nation or a dynasty filled with Confucians. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan took a deep breath and murmured, "I don't know how long this cold winter will freeze the Endless Sea." The climate of the Tianwu world was actually not extreme. Even if there was a blizzard, it would not freeze the entire Endless Sea. Otherwise, the outer sea demon beasts would not have chosen this time to attack the deep sea. After all, the dragon race was the dragon race. Their upper limit and potential were much higher than the natives of the Tianwu world. The reason why the outer sea demon beasts were able to suppress the dragon bloodline demon beasts was because the dragon bloodline demon beasts were not on good terms. Not only were there two large factions, the Sea Demon Guild and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, but even the Sea Demon clans were not obedient. Secondly, the internal friction in the Endless Sea was too severe. Coupled with the fact that they had been ruthlessly beaten by the Great Old Ones, the various Sea Demon clans and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had suffered heavy losses. Therefore, during this period of time, the outer sea demon beasts' overall strength was above the dragon bloodline demon beasts. However, with enough time, the dragon bloodline demon beasts' recovery speed was much more terrifying than the outer sea demon beasts. If they had predicted that the Endless Sea would be frozen by this winter, the outer sea demon beasts would probably have continued to wait for an opportunity instead of choosing this time to start a war with the dragon bloodline demon beasts. "I'm afraid it will take a long time." A calm voice rang out. Shortly after, Ying Zai appeared in front of Lin Yuan's palace, surrounded by a group of gray-scaled flood dragon people. Chapter 1199. Looking at the gray-scaled flood dragon people, Lin Yuan couldn't help but laugh. Perhaps Ying Zai was not as powerful as the Shangqing Heavenly Exalted Celestial and could not move freely in the Endless Sea. However, Ying Zai was still an ancestral demon and could be considered one of the peak experts in the Tianwu world. If Ying Zai wanted to break into the City of Trade, he wouldn't need to spend much effort. After all, there was a one-way teleportation formation in the City of Trade. Most of the defensive facilities in the City of Trade were for the inside and not the outside. Even if an army came in through the teleportation formation, they would have to take down the outer walls first. The difficulty of that was no less than attacking from the outside. However, for an expert like Ing Zai, as long as he entered the Endless Sea, wouldn't it be easy to break into Lin Yuan's palace? Ing Zai probably didn't have much evil intentions. Otherwise, these gray-scaled flood dragon people would have suffered heavy casualties. How could they still surround Ing Zai? If that's the case, freezing the Endless Sea is your gods worshipping cult's doing? Lin Yuan raised his eyelids and swam up from the cushion. He sized up Ing Zai expressionlessly. Ing Zai laughed and said in a clear voice, "Shallow means not worth mentioning, not worth mentioning." Speaking till here, Ing Zai took a deep breath. His eyes were overflowing with cold light. He continued to speak loudly, "I have no choice but to visit you. I hope that Dragon King can forgive me." All right. After Ing Zai finished speaking, Lin Yuan already understood. God's worshipping cult probably couldn't win against the heavenly court and had been kicked out of the game. It was hard to say how the variant humans were doing. The outer sea's demonic beasts were definitely in the hands of the heavenly court. Otherwise, the Withered Wood Empire wouldn't have, coincidentally, erupted. The main reason was that the heavenly court had suffered too much in his hands. They wanted to lure him out of the Endless Sea and take advantage of the situation to wipe out the dragon race of the Four Seas. After all, no matter how powerful Lin Yuan was, the Endless Sea wasn't his territory. He couldn't leave behind many trump cards to deal with the heavenly court. However, Ing Zai wasn't someone to be trifled with. He used some secret method and paid a huge price to freeze the Endless Sea, causing the heavenly court's following plans to go to waste. It could be said that he was taking drastic measures and was extremely ruthless. Could it be that there was such a deliberate ice seal? He cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan and said with a bitter smile, "Dragon King, there's no need to be so surprised. Although we've cast a spell to stop the monster beasts from making their next move, it's still just a small trick. It won't be long before the heavenly court can break our spell." But what's strange is that according to our calculations, the heavenly court should have been able to unseal the Endless Sea a long time ago, but they haven't done anything yet. So, I guess that they must have other plans and that's why they've taken the liberty to visit us. Alright, I got it. Lin Yuan replied indifferently. However, in his heart, he once again revealed a look of disdain towards this literati star. He was indeed a wise literati star. Every step he took was calculated, but not a single one of them was correct. This was also a kind of ability. Now that the Endless Sea was frozen, the monster beasts from the outer sea would definitely be unable to attack the dragon bloodline monsters. If Lin Yuan took advantage of this time to leave the Endless Sea and go to the Withered Wood dynasty to solve the problem of the corpse chi of the drought demon, then the Endless Sea would be unsealed as soon as Lin Yuan left. Although they didn't dare to say that they could destroy the dragon clan of the Four Seas before Lin Yuan returned, they could at least guarantee that the dragon bloodline monsters would be completely destroyed before Lin Yuan returned. At that time, even if Lin Yuan rushed back, he would be powerless in front of the rolling tide. But the problem was, would Lin Yuan be so stupid? Would he ignore the dragon bloodline monsters and go to deal with the problem of the Withered Wood dynasty first? This was not looking down on Lin Yuan's foresight and vision, but completely treating Lin Yuan as a lone wolf. Ing Zai took a deep breath, still maintaining his cupped hands posture, and said in a deep voice, "Dragon King, although my words may make you a little unhappy, the manpower that the heavenly court has invested this time has far exceeded our previous expectations. The two brothers Yin Jiao and Yin Hong are just the vanguard, so I think that you need our help." This time Lin Yuan didn't answer directly, but looked at Ing Zai meaningfully. Lin Yuan didn't know who was behind the god worship sect, but at present he could infer that Ing Zai was related to Ing Zheng. Moreover, the Qin state at that time didn't give the Qi practitioners any space in terms of religion. For example, the famous burning books and burying Confucians incident was referring to Ing Zheng's massacre of the otherworldly people and necromancers in the Qin state. However, it wasn't a problem to call it burning books and burying Confucians. After all, the Confucians of that era didn't all refer to the Confucians. These Confucians usually looked like scholars, but they could suddenly turn into Qi practitioners. Those who didn't know the inside story would naturally think that Ing Zheng was burying the Confucians. Looking at the history of his previous life, any human king who could leave his name in history and wasn't praised by the Confucians seemed to be in existence that couldn't live under the same sky with these Qi practitioners. But it was normal. After all, the grudge was formed during the period of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. Although the Son of Heaven and the human king referred to the same profession, they were like fire and water. The Ying clan would never mix with the heavenly court. Not to mention the heavenly court, even Qi practitioners were something that could bring disaster to the country and the people in the eyes of the Ying clan. But there was nothing absolute in the world. Just like when Lin Yuan met Yu Jiang, didn't they also change to the Western sect? In a situation where one wrong step could lead to death, no one was worthy of trust. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan said in a deep voice, "I wonder who this we refers to." Ying Zai took a deep breath and said with a smile, "Dragon King, when you heard the words God worship sect, what was your first reaction?" God worship sect? God. No. The concept of God was proposed by Hongjun after Hao Yin established the heavenly court. In the beginning, the untainted world was called God and Devil. The top experts born in the untainted world were never divided into God and Devil. Although they were more powerful, they didn't need to be divided into factions, and they didn't need to accept the worship and worship of the world. Instead, they did what they wanted to do. The concept of God worship sect at first referred to totems. When the human race struggled to survive in the untainted world, they had to worship powerful untainted world creatures and carve the characteristics or appearances of those untainted world creatures on stone tablets and animal skins to ensure that other untainted world creatures wouldn't dare to attack them at will. These were the first totems. Compared to the later immortals who only accepted incense and protected their followers depending on their mood, totems were much more dedicated. Chapter 1200. Before the dynasties of Xia, Shang and Zhou were established, human beings had always been living in tribes. These tribes were scattered in different areas, but they all had one thing in common, that was worshipping totems. Almost every tribe had a different totem. For example, the legendary 4 fierce beasts were totems. Chaos, Cheong Qi, Tao Wu and Tao Tai were the totems of the 4 tribes, which were defeated by Emperor Shun and exiled to different areas. After all, ever since Goddess Nviwa created human beings had been at the bottom of the food chain in the prehistorical world. Even though they were born with great fortune and had Goddess Nviwa behind their backs, before the rise of human beings, they were nothing but food in the eyes of many prehistorical creatures. Even before the Great War of Magi Demon Dynasty, the humankind had been in an awkward position. Back then, spirit creatures felt that human beings were too weak to be mentioned in the same breath as spirit creatures. Even though human beings were created by Goddess Nviwa, the only spirit creature in the world, spirit creatures still didn't treat human beings nicely. The Wu clan's attitude towards human beings was even worse. After all, under Hongjuan's instigation, the Wu clan and the Wu clan were absolutely irreconcilable. In the Wu clan's eyes, human beings were created by Goddess Nviwa. No matter whether spirit creatures were willing to admit it or not, they all believed that human beings were part of the spirit creatures. During the war against the spirit creatures, the Wu clan had destroyed countless human clans. They were extremely weak. Not to mention the powerful beings in the prehistorical era, even the ferocious beasts in the prehistorical era without intelligence could easily destroy one human clan after another. In addition, human beings also had to fight against the harsh ecological environment. Almost every second, countless human beings died. However, no matter how hard human beings tried, they could not avoid falling to the bottom of the food chain in the prehistorical era. Therefore, in order to survive, human beings had to change. Some human clans began to worship ferocious beasts and spirit beasts on their own initiative, carving their images on rock walls and animal skins. When they couldn't even fill their stomachs, they still had to prepare a large number of offerings to please these worshipped creatures. Lin Yuan once heard a saying, "If 20 people with different abilities and personalities were locked up in an apartment and then tried to make them fight each other, the one who survived to the end might not be the strongest or the wisest. Instead, it would be the one who could adapt to the environment and make changes the quickest." As it turned out, those clans who chose to worship totems all survived, and after the Great War of Magi Demon Dynasty, they quickly became the mainstream species in the prehistorical world. At the beginning there were many totems, and the last winner was the Wuxia clan, whose totem was snake. In fact, this worship of totems had reached a terrifying level because according to some ancient records, almost all existences that could be related to heroes basically had the appearance of a snake with a human face. For example, Suirenshi, Nuwa, Fushi, and even the classic of mountains and seas, Gonggong, and Pangu had the appearance of a snake with a human face. However, there were 2 versions of why Huaxia's totem changed from a snake to a dragon. When the Yellow Emperor and Yinglong joined forces to conquer the world, not to mention the other clans, even the strongest Yan Emperor and Qiyu were defeated one by one. After the Yellow Emperor unified the world, Yinglong, as an ally, asked the Yellow Emperor to invite all the clans to go to Pusan for a talisman fusion. In other words, a part of the totem worshipped by each clan was taken out to form a new totem, which was later known as the Dragon Totem. After that, the benefits that the Dragon clan received were mind-numbing. Almost everything in the world could be related to the dragon clan, but Yinglong became a true god of creation. The second version was that the Yellow Emperor set out to conquer the world, conquering clans of all sizes. Every time he defeated an opponent, he would take a part of the opponent's totem and add it to his own totem. This was to show his status as the victor, and also to deter those who dared to go against the Yellow Emperor's clan. Over time, when the Yellow Emperor became the ruler of the world, the original snake totem had become a different kind of monster. However, this monster carried the glory of the Yellow Emperor, so the Yellow Emperor waved his hand, and there was a dragon in the world. Many people said that one of the 12 zodiacs was a creature that did exist. They did not believe that the ancestors would include a creature that did not exist in the 12 zodiacs. However, if one did not look at those mythical stories, the truth should be so. The dragon was a creature that the original snake totem of the Yellow Emperor's clan absorbed part of the totems of the defeated clans. Although it did not exist, it symbolized the glory of the ancestors of mankind. Therefore, without the exaggeration of the mythical background, the ancestral dragon in the world should be the Yellow Emperor, Shen Yuan. After that, even after his death, he would turn into a dragon soul to protect China. Later on, some emperors called themselves the true dragon son of heaven, but most of them were just bragging. In the eyes of the oldest emperors, the so-called dragon was not a creature, but the glory and responsibility of being the king of mankind. The descendants and successors of the dragon should be traced back to the Yellow Emperor, Shen Yuan, and not some species that existed in legends. The meaning of "everyone is like a dragon" was also referring to the hope that the descendants of China would become heroes and great people, and not all demons and monsters, right? Of course, Lin Yuan was not sure if there was a world that was exactly the same as his previous world, but there was no mythical background in this world. However, he had indeed seen Hongyun, Hanba, Yujiang, the Yin brothers and other mythical figures. Therefore, he guessed that the Fushan talisman was something that really happened in his previous world. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan sighed. The existence of the Yellow Emperor, Shen Yuan, was an insurmountable mountain in his eyes. None of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were simple, not to mention that there were other incomparably powerful races in the Eldritch world, as well as some innate gods and demons that were born with the cultivation of Zenith Heaven. These powerful existences were firmly suppressed in the hands of Hongjun for countless years. Could he really deal with Hongjun? Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan's desire to know the secret of the birth of the Tianwu world grew a little more. However, Lin Yuan's expression did not change. He just looked at Ying Zai indifferently. After a long time he said in a deep voice, "Totems? Can you at least tell me how many totems there are in the God Worship sect? Or is it that the God Worship sect does not want to ally with this king, but to use me as cannon fodder?" The existence of totems was not something that needed to be hidden. Those ancient tribes would even carve totems in the most conspicuous places to tell all the nearby creatures that the tribe was under their protection. If Ying Zai was unwilling to tell him how many totems there were in the God Worship sect, Lin Yuan would really doubt the credibility of Ying Zai's words. Chapter 1201. Although there were many tribes in the ancient times and the totems they worshipped were quite complicated, due to the gap in time, there was very little credible information left behind. Even the totems could only be roughly described by species, such as the birds of the Yanzi clan and the sheep of the Sui clan. It was worth mentioning that many people said that Wu Ziqian was the only and the first empress, but in fact she was not. Yanzi was the first empress. Even Huashu, who was often confused with her, the big shot who gave birth to Fuxi and Yuhua, also had the surname Feng. The surname Feng was created after Yanzi and Suiren formed an alliance through marriage. Strictly speaking, Huashu was a member of Yanzi, not a person. The later generations honored the Yanzi clan as the Mysterious Lady, the Plain Lady, the Su Lady, and the Emperor Yanzi. In addition to the mythological background, the name of the North Star also came from her. Some legends even said that the river diagram and the Book of Luo were created by the Yanzi clan. The earliest symbols and words also came from her. Whether it was the time of the appearance or the contribution to mankind, the Yanzi clan was the first. However, the Yanzi clan was such a terrifying empress, yet their tribe's totem was only referred to as the black bird or the green bird. Later on, when the Yellow Emperor unified the world, he initiated the abdication system. After the 3 sovereigns ruled the world and the 5 emperors settled the world, culture gradually flourished and a series of well-known totems appeared. For example, the 4 ferocious beasts. Although Lin Yuan was still in awe of these ancient existences, he was not like a mountain Pao who entered the city and saw everything new. Just the guests of the Purple Cloud Palace, the Tianwu world had Shangqing Tianzuan and Red Cloud Taoist Hanba, the direct descendant of the Yellow Emperor, the blood descendants of the Yinjia brothers Baigan Yujiang and Luoyu from the Green Mountains. The Zhou dynasty had enjoyed 800 years of national fate, but including himself there was no emperor. Even his own territory was getting smaller and smaller, and he had to keep the national fate for 800 years even when the outside world was in chaos. Some people that Lin Yuan did not know were probably not ordinary. There might be a descendant of the Ying family on the side of God worship sect, but for Lin Yuan, his cards were obviously much smaller than those mentioned above. However, during the time of Ying Zheng, he was a man who dared to kill all the qi cultivators under the heaven, and had even sent Su Fu to lead his army to search for the immortal mountains in the ocean. If Ying Zheng was here, Lin Yuan would naturally have to show him some respect. But Ying Zheng was not worthy of his respect, and Ying Zheng should know this very well. What's more, even though the god-worshipping cult couldn't defeat the heavenly court, they had the confidence to fight against the heavenly court. No matter how one looked at it, the god-worshipping cult must have the backing of a mighty figure, right? Lin Yuan would not be surprised even if the four beasts stood behind Ying Zai. He would even feel that it was only natural. A man's name is like the shadow of a tree. This sentence was an unchanging truth no matter where it was. Just like now, Lin Yuan had cultivated an invincible aura in the heaven martial world. Even those whose cultivation was higher than Lin Yuan's would have to think twice before facing Lin Yuan. Many times they would even weaken their aura before making a move. In fact, the reputation of the heavenly court in the untainted world was not good. After all, the original master of the heavenly court, Emperor Haoyin, was just a boy beside Hongjun in the legends. Not to mention the 6 saints of heaven, even Taoist Red Cloud and the demon master Kunping had to obediently bow their heads and call them senior brothers. Of course, Emperor Haoyin only bowed his head in front of the top experts in the untainted world, which was much better than Zhang Bairen. In addition, when the heavenly court was first established, it was extremely short of manpower in all aspects. Even if Hongjun favored this boy, it was impossible for him to let his disciples join the heavenly court, right? Even if Hongjun had the face and strength to do so, what good would it do for Hongjun to humiliate the other experts in the untainted world? Thus, the god's investiture tribulation was born. Many chess enthusiasts stood behind the scenes and even participated in it themselves. They fought until the sky turned dark and the earth turned dark. Only then did they fill up the list of gods and set up the embryonic form of the heavenly court. This made the heavenly court truly a great power that dominated the 3 realms. Of course, the heavenly court was not always hated by people. Zhang Bairen, who was also the ruler of the heavenly court, was doing very well. When he became the ruler of the heavenly court was already extremely powerful. He even had the support of the Taishang. He could be said to be extremely domineering. The immortals in the heavenly court were demoted at will. Who knew how many great qi practitioners in the mortal world were waiting to be ranked among the immortals? Even if the god worship sect was a remnant of the totems from the antiquity times, it absolutely did not have the courage to go against the heavenly court in the ancient times. It was the same even in the Tianwu world. After all, although the heavenly emperor of the Tianwu world was GFA, one should not forget that his elder brother was the Ziwei emperor. In the past, his generals Neza, Yang Jian, and the others also served in the heavenly court. It could be said that they were inextricably linked to the heavenly court. When the heavenly court was restored, GFA would naturally become the heavenly emperor of the Tianwu world. At that time, unless he directly fell out with Hongjun and established his own sect, he would definitely have to support these immortals of the heavenly court. Even if it was a different world, he would still be the immortal king. If the god worship sect did not have a powerful backer behind them, even if Lin Yuan lent them the courage, they would not dare to fall out with the heavenly court. They are just some demons that are not presentable in public. In terms of reputation, perhaps they are not as good as you, Dragon King. Ying Zai put on a fake smile and cupped his hands. He slightly bowed to Lin Yuan and said, "Even if I say their names, Dragon King may not know. After all, you are in existence from the ancient times." Hearing this, Lin Yuan slightly narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "In that case, this king thinks that the so-called god worship sect is just a dispensable force. This king does not need your help." Lin Yuan's words could be said to be extremely disrespectful. In the face of the god worship sect's emissary, he said that the god worship sect was dispensable. What was the difference between this and slapping people in the face? No matter how good Ying Zai's calmness was, he could not help but change his expression at this moment. He sneered and said, "Dragon King, are you saying that even if the god worship sect joins hands with the heavenly court, you don't care?" If you don't care whether your souls will be scattered or not, does this king still need to care? Lin Yuan opened his mouth, revealing a ferocious smile and asked in a cold tone. Good, good, good. Ing Zai was so angry that he laughed and said the word good 3 times in a row. Immediately, he waved his big sleeve and said in a clear voice, we will meet again in the future. I hope that when we meet in the future, Dragon King, you can still be so calm and composed and say that the God worship sect is just, no, force. Chapter 1202. Ing Zai emphasized the words dispensable, his anger almost reaching the heavens. Lin Yuan even suspected that if Ing Zai wasn't in the critical period of transforming and couldn't be affected, he might even fight with him in the city of trade. I say don't look down on the God worship sect. Although there are many small fries, if you want to be serious, I'm afraid even Red Cloud Taoist would have to avoid them. Let me see. Cheong Chi Tao Tai Hundun Bayan Jioing Bayan Gudiao Zhuhuai Hudo. Any one of these 10 would be enough to make you suffer. Lin Yuan? In all likelihood, there was a big shot behind the worship of God's religion, which was what Lin Yuan had thought from the beginning. However, Lin Yuan had never expected that the foundation of the Church of Gods would be so tyrannical. Even Red Cloud Taoist would have to avoid them. Even Shangqing Celestial Venerable would have to go weak in the knees, okay? The 4 ancient beasts ranked at the top of the list were all famous, and any one of them had wrestled with Emperor Shun before. Although the 4 ancient beasts were all losers, they were all powerful beings in the prehistorical world. In fantasy novels, they were basically holy princes of holy clans, or top-grade families that could shake the entire continent with a stomp of their feet. Basically, all of them were related to the Yellow Emperor. For example, Cheong Chi was Xiaohao's untalented son, and Xiaohao was the Yellow Emperor's eldest son. If the dynasty wasn't abdicated, Cheong Chi's father would be the crown prince of a country. When he saw a terrifying existence like Hamba, Cheong Chi could even call her aunt. Bayan was Zhuanshu's untalented son. In other words, Bayan's background was more powerful than Cheong Chi's. After all, Zhuanshu was one of the 5 emperors and the Yellow Emperor's grandson. In terms of seniority, Bayan might not be as powerful as Cheong Chi, but in terms of power he was definitely above Cheong Chi. Hun Dun was the one with the highest seniority among the 4 beasts because his father was the Yellow Emperor. As for Tao Tai, he should be considered one of the 4 beasts with a relatively low background. There were also many legends. For example, some people said that Tao Tai was the descendant of Yen Di, and some said that Tao Tai was the 5th son of the ancestral dragon. Even in the myths of later generations, when some immortals saw Tao Tai, they had to respectfully address him as the 5th young master. As for the other 6 ferocious beasts, they might not be as powerful as the 4 ferocious beasts, and none of them had the ability to challenge the human sovereign. However, they were definitely among the top ferocious beasts in the classic of mountains and seas. With such a group together, it wouldn't be a problem to call them the 10 ancient beasts. However, it was indeed as the system had said. Any one of these 10 ferocious beasts was not something that the current Lin Yuan could deal with. If he were to face one of them alone, Lin Yuan might be forced to use all his trump cards, and his chances of winning might not even be more than 50%. What's more, the vicious 10 were on the same side. If Lin Yuan really wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Church of Gods, and if he was hindered by the matter of the 10 ancient beasts, the other party would probably come together. After all, there was still a difference between reality and novels. In novels, the protagonists slapped the children of the aristocratic families, but they only beat the young ones and the old ones. The problem was that each of the 10 ancient beasts had lived for countless years and had seen countless storms. If they were provoked, combined with Lin Yuan's achievements and potential, they would not come to test Lin Yuan at all. It was estimated that the direct thought in their minds was that this boy would become a great man in the future and must not be left alive. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan calmed down a little. His originally emotionless face suddenly showed a touch of ridicule. He grinned and said, I thought that the Church of Gods was backed by a few powerful people, but it turns out that they are all fierce, stubborn, violent, and unpresentable. But to be honest, except for the 4 ancient beasts, do you think I would be afraid of the rest? Seeing a touch of horror on Ing Zai's face, Lin Yuan changed the topic and said with a smile, however, even if the 4 ancient beasts come in person, this king's attitude will not change. There are not many places in the Tianwu world that believe in totems. You have been hiding for many years, how much power of incense can you accumulate? If you fight with this king, it's hard to say whether you can win or not, but you can be sure that the final winner will not be the Church of Gods. Do you believe it or not? Hearing this, Yingzai opened his mouth and his face was a little gloomy. For a moment he could not find any words to refute Lin Yuan's words. After all, this was the truth. Compared to the cultivation system of the untainted world, the supreme masters and monster kings in the Qianwu world had actually reached the level of immortal. Regardless of whether they were earthly immortals or celestial immortals, their essential strength was not much different. Just like in the untainted world, after reaching the level of monster king, one could begin to occupy a mountain and be the king. Unless one provoked the famous immortals on the list of deification, the later Qi practitioners who became immortals might not be able to do anything to these monster kings. Take the monkey as an example. Although he called himself the Great Sage, in fact he was only a monster king. At most, he was at the peak of the monster king realm. Naturally, no one cared about him when he was the handsome monkey king in Mount Huagua. However, after he called himself the Great Sage, the Heavenly Court immediately launched a destructive attack on Mount Huagua. Even if the game between the Most High and the Western religious sect in the journey to the West was not to be discussed, the Heavenly Court would still attack the monkey. After all, the title that the monkey gave himself did not match his strength at all. This was just like the officials in ancient times who had different standards of food and clothing according to different ranks and departments. As long as you obediently stayed within this range, no one would care even if you were a powerful minister who overthrew the emperor. However, if you jumped out of this range, you would immediately become a rebellious traitor. Of course, it would be fine if the monkey was the only one who called himself the Great Sage. However, the monkey and the other 6 demons were reckless. After they became sworn brothers, they did not take the living beings of the 3 realms seriously at all. Titles such as the Great Sage who pacifies heaven, the Great Sage who covers the sea, the Great Sage who drives the god, and the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas were basically directly offended the immortals of the Heavenly Court, the immortals of deification, and the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas. They were just 7 monster kings. How could they have a good ending if they were so arrogant? Look at the demons and ghosts on the journey to the West. They were all majestic. In fact, they were all props used by the Western religious sect to put on a show. No matter whether they were good or bad, good or evil, they would basically be killed by the monkey. If it was during the journey to the gods, they would definitely die. If they died, they would be sent to the god list to be controlled by others. Only ghosts would be willing to take up such a position. Those with a little bit of status and background would not agree to use their own lives to put on a show for the Western religious sect. Chapter 1203. Therefore, before the journey to the West calamity began, all the demons begged their grandfathers and grandmothers. They even used up all their wealth to invite the mighty figures to protect their lineage so that they would not be involved in the journey to the West calamity. For the untainted world at that time, many things were actually out of Hongjuan's control. For example, the 3 emperors of the Fire Cloud Cave, Empress Pingxin, and the Grand Supreme all challenged Hongjuan's supreme ruling power. Even though the Grand Supreme was not a saint of the Great Path at that time, involving the demon race would inevitably involve all the forces and even draw out the remaining forces of the 3 tribes of the Taichu. Therefore, even Hongjun had to compromise and let these demons go. However, at the same time, the Grand Supreme and the others also made a certain concession, that was, they had to gather the 81 tribulations. However, even if the Heavenly Court and the Western sect joined forces, they could not gather the 81 tribulations. After all, although the demon race was weak at that time, they were not completely without a backer. If they really wanted to look for connections whose ancestors did not have 1 or 2 mighty figures. For example, Fuxi, one of the 3 emperors, had a human head and a snake body. Although he was one of the 3 emperors, he was a real demon. After all, Fuxi's sister, Nuwa, was the only saint of the demon race. She also had a human head and a snake body. It would be strange if Fuxi, who was the elder brother, was not a demon. Behind the demon race stood a saint of the heavenly path, one of the 3 emperors. In addition, the ancestral dragon, the primordial phoenix, and the first Kirin were not dead. Although they were also tribulation takers, the means of the 3 tribes were much more powerful than the later calamities. For example, although the ancestral dragon was sealed, no one could really kill the ancestral dragon. Although the primordial phoenix did not appear in the world in the undying volcano, Kongxian and the golden winged rock were the children of the primordial phoenix. Moreover, the primordial phoenix was in the undying volcano. It was like Empress Pingxin was in the netherworld. Even if the primordial phoenix was in the undying volcano, it was not afraid of Hongjun. Together with the first Kirin, it could be said that the first Kirin suffered the lightest loss during the first calamity of the Dragon Han era. At the end of the calamity, in order to protect its race, the first Kirin sought refuge with Hongjun. It was also the only existence among the three ancestors who had fallen. The famous Kirin cliff was formed after the first Kirin fell. Its legitimate son, the four odd beasts, also became the mount of the heavenly Lord Yuanshi. However, compared to the declining dragon race and the phoenix race, the Kirin race, which was the embodiment of auspicious signs, was the best preserved force. At the same time, the Kirin race was also the existence that hated Hongjun the most. Although they were all working under Hongjun, if there was a day when a situation similar to the battle between Hongjun and Hongjun happened, even if Hongjun was at a disadvantage, the Kirin race would definitely be the first to rebel. No matter how powerful Hongjun was, it was impossible for him to fight the entire untainted land alone. Taking a step back, even if he could fight the entire untainted land alone, so what? If he killed everyone in the untainted land, who would he rule? Where would he absorb the power of incense from? Of course he could conquer all the worlds, but Hongjun could not suppress all the worlds alone. Even if he could not integrate all the races in the world. Moreover, although the untainted land was a boundless world among the boundless worlds, it was because there were 3,000 innate gods and demons. It was not because Hongjun could fight an entire boundless world alone. In other boundless worlds, there must be existences that were not inferior to him. If he kicked an iron plate again, he would have nowhere to cry. Conquering all the worlds without soldiers and generals, what was the difference between that and a joke? In the end, wouldn't he have to repeat the magnificent feat of the great god Pangu? Hongjun did not have such great courage, nor did he have the talent to sacrifice himself for the sake of all living beings. In desperation, the gods of the heaven and the Buddhas of the spirited mountain had no choice but to send their own monsters to join the calamity. That was why people later jokingly said that the monsters with backers were all taken away by the backers, and the monsters without backers were all killed by the monkey. That was normal. After all, the monsters without backers were basically those with weak bloodlines and low cultivation. Apart from Zhu Beiji and Monk Sha, who were teammates for the monkey would either be smashed to death by the stick or fought fiercely. He would even be captured by the monsters. In the end, the gods and Buddhas would always coincidentally appear to help the monkey to take away the monsters. After all, the monsters would not really risk their lives to help the Western sect. Moreover, most of the monsters were from the heaven. At that time, the heaven was the place of the supreme ruler, and the calamity of the journey to the west was a battle between Buddhism and Taoism. It was already good enough that the heaven was willing to help, so how could they expect the heaven to do the whole thing? Therefore, the monsters that were killed were those who had no background, no strength, and did not even know that they were facing a calamity. It was normal for them to be killed by the stick. In fact, it was not the first time that the mountain bandits among the mortals were used as scapegoats if they could not gather enough of the 81 calamities. After all, they were existences at the Demon King level. It would be ridiculous if the monkey could not deal with them. From this, it could be seen that the monkey causing havoc in the heaven was exaggerated. Even the monsters raised by the gods could be on par with the monkey, and even completely defeat him. The strength of the gods was naturally something that the monkey could only look up to. "I'm doing my best to cooperate with your performance." This saying couldn't be more appropriate for those immortals who had a monkey as their enemy. The monkey's strength was obvious. There was no need to mention the level of the other 6 great sages. Apart from the Bull Demon King, who was a little tougher and was stuffed into the calamity, the other 5 great sages had disappeared without a trace. There was no news of them at all. At this level, it could be said that they had reached the end of their cultivation. They could not live forever. At most, they could move mountains and fill seas, and live freely in the mortal world. If they wanted to reach a higher level, they had to find a paradise and recruit disciples and believers to accumulate the power of incense. At the beginning of the world, there were very few primitive creatures. Most of them were at the level of ancestors, and there were only a few at most. They were tainted with the power of merit and were naturally very powerful when they were born. They were similar to the carriers of the great Tao, like the innate gods and demons. They could even be said to be born as saints, such as Yang Mei, Shurchen, and Chen Kuan. There were also some who evolved from the first living creatures in the untainted land or gained intelligence through lucky chance. Although they were not born as sages, they were basically sage to be, such as Red Cloud Taoist and Demon Master Kuanpeng. As time passed, the merit of creation was gradually divided up, and the creatures born became weaker and weaker. This was especially true after humans became the protagonists of heaven and earth. At that time, the creatures born were only slightly more powerful than ordinary beasts and had some special abilities. They might not be able to gain an advantage over some strong humans. Chapter 1204. However, this was also what Hongjun wanted. Hongjun could not bear to see the living beings in the world getting stronger and stronger. Otherwise, he would not have changed the way of cultivation. In the later era, when humans and demons could only become stronger through cultivation, the path of cultivation would stop at the Demon King and Taoism realm, which was the threshold of the immortal realm in the untainted world. However, at that time, there were powerful beings like the ancestor Yang Mei. Hongjun could not be too greedy. In addition to some other calculations, he started the investiture of the gods and showed the real way of cultivation. However, he also used the investiture of the gods to control these immortals. Before they became sages, even if they were immortal, they were just spirits that were controlled. As for who could become sages, wasn't it up to Hongjun, who controlled the heavenly way, to decide? Of course, the main reason was that there were large and small wars between the worlds. The untainted world was indeed a relatively powerful world. However, it was impossible to rely on Hongjun and Yang Mei to defeat all the invading worlds, let alone destroy and annex other worlds. Therefore, the way of cultivation was something that Hongjun had to teach even if he did not want to. Just like the 6 sages. The so-called Qi refinement cultivators were essentially a tool used by Hongjun to maintain his rule. If he encountered a powerful one, he would use the investiture of the gods and elixirs to control them before teaching them the real way of cultivation. However, no matter how powerful Hongjun was, he could not control other sky demon gods. For example, after the battle between the ancestor Yang Mei and Hongjun, she just left the untainted world and wandered in the sea of bitterness, seeing different worlds. In addition to the existence of extremely powerful individuals, there were some groups that were not inferior to the celestial sect of wonders. For example, the forces of the 3 clans led by the ancestor dragon and the Yuan Feng, the Wu tribe led by Empress Pingxin, and the ghost warriors led by Qiyu. Qiyu was a Wu with a primordial spirit. He fought with the Yellow Emperor for the throne of the human king and failed. After death, he did not enter the reincarnation cycle. He established his own ghost warriors tribe in the netherworld. Even Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was afraid of him, and other forces. Among them, the most powerful was the totem of the human race. After working together with the Yellow Emperor to rewrite the dragon totem, Yinglong had become a god of creation. By the time the Yellow Emperor unified the world, Yinglong's strength was no weaker than the current prime of Tong Tian. After so many years of accumulation, Yinglong was able to stay in the south to recuperate. Otherwise, according to Hongjuan's methods, Yinglong would have either been killed or driven away. There was no way he could have retreated successfully. The time of the totem's appearance could not be verified. However, it had risen during the Great War of the Witch Demon race. After the Witch Demon race and the Witch Demon race had fallen from grace, the totem had instead become the strongest force outside of the Xian sect led by Hongjun. Many people said that the Shang dynasty and the Zhou dynasty were already the oldest dynasties that could be verified. However, there were also many people who firmly believed that an even older dynasty had existed before the Shang dynasty, the Xia dynasty. It was even to the extent that there could have been different dynasties before the Xia dynasty. This was also a speculation. Only those who had experienced that era knew that it was a long and drawn-out war. It was a terrifying battle between the Xian sect's cultivators and the totems of various tribes. Countless powerful cultivators and totems walked onto the battlefield dauntlessly, almost completely shattering the entire eldritch world. At that time, the Xia dynasty was not considered strong. Even though it had the protection of the totems, it was almost annihilated in that war. A large amount of its existence had been erased. Even the Xia dynasty itself was almost wiped out, let alone the dynasties before the Xia dynasty. After that war, even the existence of the totems themselves had become a symbol and not something that truly existed. This was because the victors of that war were the Xian sect's cultivators led by Hongjun. Regarding that history, as a bystander, the heavenly Tao was actually very clear about it. Through the knowledge instilled in him by the system, Lin Yuan also understood most of that history. The totem ancient god could be said to be the only existence in the entire eldritch world that had fought a head-on war with Hongjun and the Xian sect. Compared to the scheming during the Great Witch Demon War, the internal strife during the investiture of the gods, and the concealment during the journey to the west, the destruction of the totems was the only time that Hongjun had made up his mind to wipe out his opponent. However, he could not do it from the level of scheming. He could only lead the Xian sect's cultivators to fight the opponent head-on. In the end, he barely won with his strength. Even the 6 destined sages of that time had fallen in that war more than once. If their primordial spirits were not entrusted to the heavenly Tao, even if they fell, they could be reborn from the heavenly Tao. Perhaps there would not be the 6 destined sages by Hongjuan's side. Even Hongjun himself had suffered heavy injuries in that war. If not for this, Sanqing would not have had the chance to plot against Hongjun during the investiture of the gods. This was because Hongjun was recuperating from his injuries at that time. Although he had planned the investiture of the gods, he had only personally participated in the investiture of the gods when the investiture of the gods was about to end. It was also because of this that when Lin Yuan wanted to practice the way of the totem ancient god, it also supported most of the time. Although after embarking on the way of the totem ancient god, Lin Yuan's future was likely to be out of its control, as the way of the heavenly Tao, even if it had already given birth to its own spiritual wisdom, most of the time, its rationality was far more than its emotions. Lin Yuan's cultivation of the way of the totem ancient god would obviously increase his chances of winning against Hongjun. As for the future Lin Yuan's loss of control, what did that have to do with the way of the heavenly Tao? After getting rid of Hongjun, the way of the heavenly Tao would not make the same mistake again. It would never allow others to get close to it and control it. Therefore, even if it lost control of Lin Yuan in its eyes, Lin Yuan was just a trouble like Yinglong was in Hongjuan's eyes. He was not a death calamity that was enough to threaten its existence. Anyway, as long as its hosts did not all cultivate the way of the totem ancient god, there was nothing it could not accept. If one day it really had to kill Lin Yuan, how it dealt with Hongjun now would be how it dealt with Lin Yuan in the future. When Lin Yuan first started to cultivate the way of the totem ancient god, he did not want to become a puppet of the system. But now, after obtaining the records of that history from the system, he was shocked to realize the power of totems. The leisurely Yinglong under Hongjuan's nose was the totem. The 4 beasts that were defeated by Emperor Shun and could not be killed were the totem. The Xianmen group was severely damaged and gave Sanqing a chance, which caused Hongjun to lose control of everything was the totem. Even the existence of the totem, if mentioned in front of Hongjun, was afraid that Hongjun would be defeated. If it were not for the fact that in that history Hongjun had lost too much face and suffered too many losses, after he destroyed the powerful totem group, how could he not show off his outstanding military achievements, but erase and hide that history? Chapter 1205. How powerful the totem group was in its heyday was a mystery to many primitive creatures. After all, in order to cover up the war between the Xian sect and the totem group, Hongjun almost cut off the river of time and buried most of the history before the Shang dynasty. Even Hongjun could not shake the existence of the totem group, except for historical fragments such as Zhang Jie's creation of characters and Sui Ren's creation of fire. The current state of the totem group was also a mystery to Lin Yuan. According to the information that the system had given him this time, the totem group had almost been completely destroyed. Except for Yinglong, whose strength was now comparable to Hongjuan's, all the other totems had been destroyed in the Xian sect. A huge cultivation force had become a symbol that only existed. This was not something that could be done with just one massacre. Hongjun could do this, which could only mean that he had reached some kind of agreement with Yinglong in private. And after this agreement was reached, Hongjun completely destroyed the totem group and directly destroyed the totem group. In other words, after the war, Hongjun did not have the intention to accept followers at all. He directly killed them all. But the 10 beasts of the god-worshipping sect, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed, and he took the initiative to communicate with the system with his mind. The system was silent for a moment and then slowly replied to Lin Yuan. Is there anything to be confused about? For example, if you were to die in the endless sea, would you really die then? Hearing this, Lin Yuan could only respond with silence. Although he was not the kind of lunatic who had to practice to the maximum level in the novice village and pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger, Lin Yuan was still very concerned about the safety of his life. Every Black Water Dragon King temple left in the northern frontier could be said to be Lin Yuan's life. If he died in the endless sea, unless the other party also mastered the power of the underworld black water and directly made him unable to be reincarnated, even the means of attacking the soul could not be completely killed. Even he, a demonic beast who had been cultivating for 4 years, had such means. How could the totem group that could fight against the Shen sect in their heyday be so easy to kill? After one calamity after another, he did not see the destruction of the 3 tribes and the extinction of the liches and demons. To completely destroy a force, even the way of heaven could not pay the price. And even if the price was paid, it might not be able to completely destroy a force, because you could not calculate all the other parties' backup plan. There would always be a few fishes that escaped the net. Of course, when the celestial sect of wonders and the totem clan were at war, Yinglong did not take action. However, he was still a member of the totem clan. Perhaps he could ignore the life and death of the totem clan for the sake of benefits, but he would not watch that person completely destroy the totem clan. However, he would still send a few survivors away. Even that person would give him face. Moreover, even if the totem group was completely destroyed, you know very well in your heart that the Eldritch world and the Tianwu world are on a completely different level. The Tianwu world is full of fear and ignorance of the outside world, but the Eldritch world has been conquering the Sea of Chaos and the heavenly battlefield for so many years, who knows how many worlds it has destroyed. How could the totem group that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Shen sect not know anything about the myriad worlds? In fact, in every world there is the inheritance of the totem group. It is just that some of them gradually walked on other paths with the passage of time. Let me give you an example. In a middle world that is infinitely close to the Great Thousand World, there is the existence of the 10 immemorial ferocious beasts. Among them, the true dragon, the phoenix and the Kirin grew up in that middle world, but without talking about the foundation, their strength is not weaker than the 3 tribes of the Eldritch world. Haha, that person is indeed powerful. In the Eldritch world he is almost an autocrat. He can suppress the 3 tribes by himself, but there is no lack of powerful figures in the myriad worlds who can stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Otherwise, why do you think that when the death tribulation appeared he just sent a projection to greet you, and then only the heavenly court became active? Believe it or not, as soon as that person leaves the Eldritch world in less than 10 breaths of time, the Eldritch world will be beaten into a wasteland. After the system displayed line after line of words, even with Lin Yuan's current temperament, he could not help but shiver. The Sea of Chaos and the heavenly battlefield. These were 2 existences that he did not understand at all. After leaving the world, the void zone was the Sea of Bitterness. However, the word chaos was a great promotion in the Eldritch world. After the apotheosized tribulation, it was recorded that the 6 heavenly sages in Hongjun had established Taoist rites in the chaos, leaving only their doppelgangers to manage the Eldritch world. According to Lin Yuan's current vision, they did not do this to let the Eldritch world enter a period of autonomy, but to resist some existences, they had to send their real bodies to the battlefield, leaving only their doppelgangers to manage the Eldritch world. The reason why the chaos was a taboo in the Eldritch world was that even sages could die in it if they were not careful. However, there was no detailed record of the dangers in the chaos. Therefore, the Sea of Chaos and Bitterness is the heavenly battlefield? Lin Yuan sent out his thoughts again. The heavenly battlefield is the heavenly battlefield, and the Sea of Chaos is the Sea of Bitterness. Of course, the Sea of Chaos is a saying in the Eldritch world. The former refers to an unknown area that contains great danger and great terror, while the latter is a saying of the Western religious sect. It is used here to generally refer to the void outside the world. It can be said to be an endless existence with no end in sight. When the chaos and the Sea of Bitterness are put together, it can only be said to be a battlefield, or it may contain other uncertain factors. For example, the Sea of Bitterness outside the heavenly martial world can be called the Sea of Chaos because Yang Mei is in charge. It means that the Sea of Bitterness outside the heavenly martial world has a great danger that can kill sages. Moreover, in the eyes of an existence like Yang Mei, there is no way to hide from him. Space and time are all under his control when entering the heavenly martial world. Therefore, the Sea of Chaos is just a place of great danger and great terror in the void. As for the heavenly battlefield, well, you will probably come into contact with it soon. I can tell you with full responsibility that once the heavenly martial world officially becomes a medium-class world, whether you are willing or not, you will be pulled into the war of the myriad worlds. You can either defeat other worlds and plunder their land and resources to strengthen the heavenly martial world, or vice versa. Any world in the Sea of Bitterness is the hunter and the prey. No one will care whether you are willing or not. As long as they can set foot in the heavenly martial world, they will definitely point their weapons at the heavenly martial world. You can't be thinking that those gods and Buddhas in the history of the heavenly martial world who left behind cultivation methods, spiritual seeds, and bloodlines were just doing good deeds, right? Chapter 1206. In fact, Lin Yuan was not against participating in the War of the Myriad Worlds. In fact, he had already started preparing for it. However, the news brought by the system made Lin Yuan suck in a breath of cold air. He knew that the relationship between the Myriad Worlds was very bad, even to the point of being absolutely irreconcilable. The area of a world was only so big. No matter how frugal one was, there was still a limit. If one wanted to continue growing, one had to plunder other worlds such as the 33 heavens of the celestial court of the primitive world and the 24 heavens of the Western sect. Before they were refined, most of them were actually other middle worlds or colossal worlds. Lin Yuan suddenly remembered a science fiction novel he had read in his previous life. Some of the theories in it were very suitable for the myriad worlds. Firstly, survival was the first need of a civilization. However, as the civilization continued to grow and expand, the total amount of matter in the universe remained the same. Therefore, if one wanted to continue to survive, one had to plunder other civilizations. On the other hand, whether it was to continue to grow and expand or just to survive, the other side had to do something similar. Secondly, although some connections and inheritances would be established between the myriad worlds, in general, they might not even be able to understand their own world clearly. Naturally, they would not pay much attention to other worlds. Therefore, when two unfamiliar worlds collided, a chain of suspicion was bound to arise. For example, one's world could not determine whether the other world had ill intentions or good intentions towards it. It could not even determine how the other world would determine whether the other world had ill intentions or good intentions towards it. What was more terrifying was that it could not even determine whether the other world would attack it. Under such circumstances, a series of cold wars, confrontations, and vigilance were bound to occur, even if both sides had no ill intentions in the beginning. However, the longer such an atmosphere lasted, once something that broke the balance happened, a war would be triggered. Under such circumstances, the myriad worlds might only have the lowest level of goodwill. In other words, as long as one's world did not communicate with one's world would not take the initiative to start a war in a world where one's world did not have an urgent need. On the other hand, if one's world was exposed to one's sight first and made some hostile actions, then this goodwill would instantly dissipate. This was not good news. It could even be said that this news was extremely bad. Although the Qinwu world had a long history, it was only a small world in the end. The number of strongest experts in this world could not be considered many, and in the Eldritch world they had only just touched the threshold of immortal. If this level of battle power was directly thrown into the all-heavens battlefield, it would be no different from the primitive people of the Stone Age challenging a planetary civilization. What was even more terrifying was that once the Martial Heaven world became a medium-class world, the natives of the Martial Heaven world wouldn't be able to increase their strength in a short time. However, the Martial Heaven world's power would be greatly increased. Even quasi-saints would be able to descend upon the Martial Heaven continent. Even if they couldn't use their full strength, they wouldn't be existences that immortals could contend against. Moreover, because of Hongjuan's death tribulation, there were probably many big shots who had set their eyes on the Martial Heaven world. Currently, there was a group of traders from the Eldritch world as well as Tong Tian, a ruthless person who had established his own sect. Even the heavenly court of the Eldritch world had officially intervened in the Martial Heaven world's internal strife. Currently, there was also the God Worship sect, which had the Totem sect behind it. Moreover, it was hard to say whether or not there were other powers that had set their eyes on the Martial Heaven world, such as the existence that had forced the Grassland Wolf tribe to live in seclusion, or the mysterious power that had placed cultivation methods here. After the Martial Heaven world became a world apart, each of these existences had the ability to challenge half of the Martial Heaven world's cultivation world. Coupled with the power behind them, destroying the natives of the Martial Heaven world was just a matter of a thought. F***CK. Hell's opening. Lin Yuan cursed as he replied. According to the theory in the science fiction novel he had read in his previous life, all worlds were threats to each other, so naturally, there were two dangerous concepts that could lead to the destruction of the world. 1. Let you know of my existence. 2. Let you continue to exist. Therefore, in such a cruel battlefield where there was no choice, the only choice for a medium-class world was to hide themselves like a speck of dust. Before accumulating enough strength, they would not expose their existence because of anything. However, in the current situation, it was absolutely impossible to do so. Think positively. Don't be so pessimistic. The system comforted Lin Yuan, but Lin Yuan inexplicably felt a sense of schadenfreude. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan said faintly, "If I die, it won't do you any good. Your investment and plans will all go down the drain. Once the thing that is bred in the Tianwu world falls into the hands of that person, Tongtian sect leader or Taoist Red Cloud, then you can prepare to be a stray dog for the rest of your life and slowly wander in the myriad of worlds." The system directly typed out a line of ellipses. Listen, is this what a human should say? Host, please pay attention to your words. The current situation was not caused by my initiative, nor was it within my expectations. In the world outside the chaotic world, I can't use my full strength. Even if I want to help you, it's destined that I won't be able to do so. But if you threaten me like this, it's meaningless. What do you say? Lin Yuan directly replied with a sneer, "I'm not threatening you. I'm just stating a fact. Because according to the current situation of the martial heaven world, unless I have the strength to stand shoulder to shoulder with that person at the moment of the world's advancement, or the natives of this world break through one by one, there will be at least 5 sage to be appearing. Only then can the martial heaven world continue to exist. If I'm placed in such an environment, even surviving is a problem, let alone competing for the treasure." Speaking of this, Lin Yuan's expression became a little strange. Then, with a mocking smile, he said, "Hey, don't tell me you're thinking that I'll fight for the treasure at all costs before I die, and then let you take it away with your own strength to ensure that you're the biggest winner? Am I that kind of system? Nonsense. Lin Yuan, I'm warning you, don't smear the system's innocence for no reason." Following Lin Yuan's mocking voice, the system quickly responded, as if it didn't even hesitate for a moment. However, it was clear that from a psychological point of view, if the system responded too quickly or too slowly, it meant that there was a big problem within. Chapter 1207. This dog system, he was afraid that it really thought that way. Thinking about that, Lin Yuan's face immediately revealed a sinister expression. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan felt that the lump of air in his heart had eased a lot. Only then did he open his mouth and say, "That's right, don't tell me that you think that controlling me is the same as controlling the other hosts? You can't just randomly give me a mission and I'll let you do things for me. After that, you'll think that you've taken advantage of me, right?" If the system had a physical body, it would definitely stretch out its hand and rub its chest. After all, Lin Yuan's words were really too heart-wrenching. However, at the beginning it really did think that way. Although giving up on Lin Yuan, a host with such great potential, was like cutting off a piece of meat for the system right now, but if it could obtain the secrets of the Sky Martial world, it might not even need Lin Yuan to deal with Hongjun. Not to mention Lin Yuan was already so terrifying now, who knew if Lin Yuan would become the next Hongjun in the future. However, it's a pity that you don't have the means to forcefully control me. On my way to where I am today there have been fights, dangers, and I have also relied on the luck that you brought me to develop the northern frontier. However, if I leave you to me, I'll just lose a way to quickly grow. Any mission you give me doesn't have enough binding force. For example, you can give out a mission to snatch a treasure when the world is upgrading. According to the trust that the other hosts that you've nurtured have in you, 7 out of 10 of them would choose to complete your mission without hesitation. Because they firmly believe that they are the main characters of this era, and you, as their cheat, will live and die with them. I dare say that 80% of the hosts under you don't know your true identity, right? In other words, other than me, there are only a few hosts who know your true identity. Even if they know that they will have to face that person sooner or later, it's just like those young people in my previous life playing games. Even if it's that person in their eyes, it's nothing more than a boss. Lin Yuan waved his tail and sneered, "But I'm different. As long as you can obtain that treasure, you can abandon me in the martial heaven world at any time. So no matter how generous the reward is, how severe the punishment is, or even if you kill me, I won't do your mission. Because whether I do it or not, I'll die. Why would I let a person who abandoned me at a critical moment benefit?" If you put it that way, the system wanted to display words to refute Lin Yuan, but after a long time, it could not continue to display other words. It had dragged Lin Yuan's soul out of a dying body and threw him into an even crueler world. It could be said that no one knew Lin Yuan better than it did other than Lin Yuan himself. Abandoning Lin Yuan at a critical moment was tantamount to betrayal. And in Lin Yuan's eyes, the word betrayal would undoubtedly bring back many memories that he didn't want to face. So Lin Yuan had zero tolerance for betrayal. If it really came to that, even if the punishment for the mission was to kill him, Lin Yuan wouldn't even frown. You should know that in the Great Thousand Worlds, even if the soul is destroyed, it can be saved. For example, if someone waves the 6-soul banner, it will cause the 3,000 remnant souls of the ancient sky demon god to fly out and devour them. But if a saint sells a bit of their true spirit, they can send them into the cycle of reincarnation. If the price is enough, it is even possible to directly revive them. Don't forget how you came to this world, so I have already proven to you that I have this ability. If it really comes to that, I can guarantee that as long as you tell me the secret of the Sky Martial world, I will protect you from death. At worst, I will send you to another world. With my support and your current experience, you will recover your strength very quickly. The system still didn't give up and wanted to continue persuading Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's face was full of ridicule. He said, "If you can really do this, I don't mind cultivating again. But my request is that when you give out the mission, You must add this matter to the mission reward. That's not too much, right? This time, the system didn't immediately reply to Lin Yuan. Instead, it fell into a strange silence. And this was also within Lin Yuan's expectations. Take Lin Yuan's blood sacrifice wishing technique as an example. In theory, this was a karmic divine ability. If the blood used as a sacrifice reached a certain level in terms of quality and quantity, Lin Yuan could even use the blood sacrifice wishing technique to directly curse Hongjun to death. Moreover, it would be the kind that would completely destroy Hongjun's physical body and soul. But theory was just theory. Nowadays, Lin Yuan rarely used the blood sacrifice wishing technique. Because what could be done with it, Lin Yuan could also do with a little effort. Why would he need to bleed himself or kill other creatures? Moreover, the blood sacrifice wishing technique was not without requirements. The stronger the blood master was, the higher the quality of the blood. With Lin Yuan's current cultivation, if he let out a third of his blood, if converted to other creatures, he would have to kill at least 2 million mortals and collect all of their blood to achieve the same effect. Putting it in the system, it was actually universal. Back then, the system was able to easily extract Lin Yuan's soul from a dying body because no matter how many skills Lin Yuan practiced, he was still an ordinary person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been defeated by those bodyguards. Extracting the soul of an ordinary person didn't require much divine ability. Even a postnatal qi practitioner could do this with the help of some magic treasures. But now, Lin Yuan was a level 8 desolate demon. He was only a step away from becoming a demon king. In the great desolate world, Lin Yuan's cultivation could already be considered as a half-immortal realm existence. Even the system couldn't easily extract his soul. And even if it was successfully extracted, there was no place in the sky martial world that could allow Lin Yuan to reincarnate. But if it was stuffed into another body, if it was to find a little black snake and stuff a desolate demon realm soul into it, it was afraid that before Lin Yuan could wake up, the body would collapse on its own. In short, one obstacle after another was placed here. Even the system couldn't break through it. Therefore, its promise was nothing more than an empty promise. Unless, it was willing to add these conditions to the mission reward. Under the effect of the rules, it couldn't make empty promises. Once it promised this kind of reward, it meant that the rules recognized that it could do it. Then, no matter what, it had to fulfill its promise to Lin Yuan. Chapter 1208. The system still remained silent. Obviously, the negotiation had failed. Now that Lin Yuan was at the 8th level of the desolate demon realm, the system was powerless to do anything. If the world leveled up, Lin Yuan's cultivation would definitely continue to rise. At that time, the system would be even more powerless. With its current strength, it was unable to shake the soul of an immortal, let alone a realm above immortal. Both the system and Lin Yuan were well aware of this situation. Therefore, the rules would not allow the system to add this matter to the mission reward because it could not do it. The rules would never allow cheating. Since it was a transaction, it had to be an exchange of equal value. Otherwise, it would not be carried out. Lin Yuan only smiled at the silent system and put away the playful expression on his face. As Hongjuan's death tribulation, whether the heavenly court investigated clearly or not, he must die. After all, Hongjun had dominated the Eldritch world for countless years and had suppressed countless monsters. Even in the daily games, only the Almighty of the Sage-to-Be were qualified to exchange a few blows with Hongjun. If it was known that he had misjudged a junior from the future, where would he put his old face? Although no one had brought this matter to the surface, it could be said that everyone was well aware of it. Red Cloud Taoist had not contacted him for a long time. Hitorigami had only warned the northern frontier and disappeared. Although Shangqing Tianzuan had come once before, it was mostly to pass on a message for Hitorigami. It could be said that at this time, no one was willing to have a deep relationship with Lin Yuan. As for the experts from the Eldritch world, they would not be willing to stand out and fight side by side with Lin Yuan. Although Lin Yuan had only seen Hongjuan's projection once, he had often heard of that man's methods. Therefore, he was very clear that once the Qianwu world finished leveling up, the Eldritch world would definitely not send small monsters for him to level up. Most likely, one or even several Sage-to-Be experts would descend and directly crush the Eldritch world. But, they could run, but could Lin Yuan? The answer was obviously no. No matter how much Joss flame power Lin Yuan could use, once he left the Heaven Martial world, he would be like a rootless duckweed. Let alone going to other worlds, he might not even be able to cross the Sea of Bitterness. Therefore, for Lin Yuan there was only one way out. He had to become the god of the underworld of this world. That way, as the three realms were restored and the world leveled up, he would also have the battle prowess of a demi-saint because of the position of god of the underworld. Furthermore, he would be a demi-saint who could use all of his strength. Only then would he be able to stand firm until the Qianwu world leveled up to a great thousand world. If he could successfully cultivate the all-life scripture, then in the Qianwu world, Lin Yuan would be on the same level as the rules. Even if Hongjun came personally, he wouldn't be afraid. Ding. Congratulations to the host for triggering the breakthrough mission. Mission requirement. Host must break through to the peak of the desolate demon realm within 10 days to complete the mission. Mission reward. System update once. Failure penalty. System stripping. A new mission notification appeared in Lin Yuan's consciousness. After a while, Lin Yuan couldn't help but laugh. This time, the system's mission was obviously very rushed. Not only did it not have an official name, it even broke the restrictions of the rules, to a certain extent. If it was in the past, Lin Yuan definitely wouldn't trigger the breakthrough mission until he reached the peak of the desolate demon realm. Furthermore, he would have accepted a rather difficult mission. A mission like this that required him to reach the peak of the desolate demon realm within a time limit was as simple as eating and drinking for a cheater like Lin Yuan. And this reward, it was probably not simple. Lin Yuan hadn't received the system template for a long time. Even his bloodline was stuck at the water dragon realm for a long time. This dog system was like a dead body. It had even ignored Lin Yuan for a long time. If the system were to be upgraded this time, it would be equivalent to jumping from version 2.0 to version 3.0. He didn't know what kind of changes there would be, but if the system could break the restrictions of the rules at this time, it was obviously something good that could solve most of the problems. After all, breaking the rules was something that even the system had to pay a great price for. Furthermore, many of the mission rewards were definitely within its capabilities. Obviously, after weighing the pros and cons, the old schemer still made a compromise. After all, it understood Lin Yuan. It knew that in a situation where he was going to die anyway, Lin Yuan wouldn't let it off so easily. And no matter who got the secret of the Sky Martial world, it would become a great threat in the end. Therefore, it had to help Lin Yuan break through the situation. This time, the system would lose a lot of money. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan's heart moved. The power of incense surged and instantly pushed his attribute points to the peak. Ding. Host's attribute points have reached the peak of the desolate demon realm. The realm has been upgraded at the same time. Ding. Congratulations to the host for completing the breakthrough mission. Mission rewards are being issued. Ding. Mission rewards have been issued. The system will enter an update. System functions will be temporarily shut down. A series of notifications sounded. Lin Yuan's heart moved and saw something like a progress bar. Lin Yuan was speechless. Are you King kidding me? The speed of the progress bar could be said to be extremely slow. From 0% to 0.001%, it took a full minute. In other words, if there were no accidents, this update would take a full week's time. And in this week's time, Lin Yuan's cultivation could be said to be at the peak of the desolate demon realm. Desolate demon realm? In the past, in the Qianwu continent, he could be said to be a big boss. But whether it was the current Qianwu continent or the endless sea, such a cultivation could be said to be an ant among ants. Even now, any demon king could easily tear Lin Yuan to shreds. After all, without the support of the system, he couldn't use the power of incense. Dormant for 7 days? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't make a complicated expression, his face would probably be extremely ugly at this moment. He had no problem. But the God Worship sect had just been humiliated by Lin Yuan. Would they be able to stop? When the endless sea was unsealed, the demonic beasts in the outer sea would be restless. The heavenly court and the God Worship sect would join hands to find trouble with him. The dragon bloodline demonic beasts wouldn't be able to do much, okay? Ignoring the demonic beasts in the outer sea for 1 or 2 days was nothing. But if he didn't care about worldly affairs for 3 to 5 days, the heavenly court would pounce on Lin Yuan like sharks that had smelled blood, trying to eat him up. Therefore, to Lin Yuan, if the system functions were shut down at this time, it would be no different from a serious backstab to him. Chapter 1209. However, strictly speaking, this was not considered a stab in the back. After all, the system had to pay a huge price for breaking the rules. If Lin Yuan died because of a little negligence, the system would probably vomit blood. It would definitely feel as aggrieved as when Hongjun merged with the heavenly axiom. Jiao Yi, this king needs to cultivate in seclusion for a while to break through to the demon lord level. Pass down the order to let the dragon bloodline demon beasts fight freely. If there is nothing important, don't disturb this king. Lin Yuan left a telepathic message and retreated into the depths of the palace. He began to silently sort out his own condition. After all, he had not personally participated in a battle for a long time. He basically relied on the power of incense to fight against the enemy. Lin Yuan had not done that kind of fighting between life and death with his physical body and skills for a long time. Although there was no warning, it was always better to be prepared. At the same time, far away in the northern frontier, Li Zhong clenched his fists. His black and white eyes were filled with streaks of blood. A battle report that had just been sent not long ago directly provoked the anger of the king of the northern frontier. The demon beasts of the Hengduan mountain range came out of the grassland from the east and killed everyone in sight. They destroyed countless tribes and killed countless Shuangjin barbarian. However, things did not end as Li Zhong had expected. The demon beasts of the Hengduan mountain range swept across the grassland as if they were plowing the land. Whether it was the Shuangjin barbarian, the Withered Tree cavalry, or the northern frontier army, they were all attacked by the beast tide. The situation on the other two sides had not been investigated. However, on the northern frontier side, they had lost contact with two legions of 50,000 people. Nearly 200,000 soldiers were trapped in the grassland, bitterly resisting the endless beast tide. This was not in the F*King plan at all. These demon beasts of the Hengduan mountain range did not obediently follow Lin Yuan's plan. Instead, they treated the Frost Mirror grassland as their own paradise. As long as they appeared in the Frost Mirror grassland, no matter which force was behind them, they would be attacked crazily by the beast tide. Damn it! Li Zhong slammed his fist on the table in front of him. His face was so gloomy that it almost dripped water. Even if all 300,000 soldiers were lost, it would not be a big deal for the current northern frontier. However, the problem was that a great change had occurred in the Withered Wood dynasty. The exalted Lord of Slaughter and Salvation and the Cleansing Buddha were slaughtering people in a frenzy. It was said that they had even used an evil technique to extract the souls of the people they killed and turn them into demons and monsters. They had also refined their corpses into puppet-like demonic corpses. Currently, the Withered Wood dynasty could be said to be overrun by fiendish demons. 9 out of 10 houses were empty. The imperial family of the Withered Wood dynasty, which was also the most powerful sect of the Withered Wood dynasty, had also fallen 8 hours ago. However, the sect master who had died had been refined into a corpse demon. He once again sat on the dragon throne of the Withered Wood dynasty and commanded his subordinates. He claimed that he was the incarnation of great Emperor Zhou Juyin. Now he had become the third most powerful sect of the Withered Wood dynasty. He was independent of the two demons, but his actions were even more cruel and ruthless. At the very least, the two devils only chose cultivators to kill and refine them into their subordinates. However, this great Emperor Zhou Juyin was even more ruthless. He directly formed an army of over 1 million demonic corpses. He did not even spare the mortals of the Withered Wood dynasty. The main reason why the Withered Wood dynasty was empty was because this great Emperor Zhou Juyin liked to kill and drink blood. The demonic corpses under his command captured living people for his enjoyment. Coupled with the fact that the demonic corpses had tough bodies and did not have souls, they were basically invincible among their peers. Their elite level was definitely not inferior to the Northern Frontier Army. In terms of fearlessness and obedience, they were even stronger than the Northern Frontier Army. Currently, the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range wreaked havoc in the Frost Mirror Plains, but they did not cause much damage to the northern frontier. In fact, the number of demonic beasts that died in battle was much higher than the number of soldiers of the northern frontier. In terms of casualties, a soldier of the northern frontier would be able to kill at least 5 demonic beasts of the same level as him before he died. In the past, this was an achievement that no one dared to imagine. After all, demonic beasts were invincible in battle. However, there were many sides to every coin. The Hengduan mountain range was not the northern frontier's most troublesome enemy. The Withered Wood dynasty was. Currently, the demonic beasts of the Withered Wood dynasty were rampaging. The demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range had cut off the path to the Withered Wood dynasty. Unless the northern frontier could defeat the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range in an extremely short amount of time, they would definitely not be able to go to the Withered Wood dynasty to support Qinfang and the survivors there. These demonic beasts really deserve to die. Li Zhong's muscles were trembling slightly. He gritted his teeth and said, "Pass down my orders. Push forward the entire eastern border. I want to open up a path to the Withered Wood dynasty within half a month. Anyone who dares to accept this order will immediately attack. If this succeeds, I guarantee that the general will be promoted by 3 ranks. When the time is right, he will be allowed to lead an army. If this fails, he will seal his cultivation and receive 300 beatings. If he doesn't die, he will be stripped of his military rank and have to start over as a new soldier. The commander of the prince's guards exchanged glances with Li Zhong. He sensed Li Zhong's murderous aura and shuddered subconsciously. Then he cupped his hands at Li Zhong and strode out of the prince's mansion in the northern frontier. As Li Zhong's orders spread through the various temporary camps in the northern frontier, countless people began to have ideas. Promotion, wealth, and the death of a wife. These were the 3 great joys of a middle-aged man. On the northern frontier, the only good thing was a promotion. After all, as long as one had hands and feet and was willing to work seriously, even if they didn't become rich, they could at least live a well-off life in the northern frontier. Lin Yuan also didn't have any intention of spreading the law of marriage. In other words, as long as one could raise a family, it wouldn't be a problem to marry as many wives as they wanted. Only a promotion. In the northern frontier, where there were so many talents, it was simply something that one could only dream of. In terms of cultivation talent, those who graduated early from the academies in the northern frontier were all geniuses. In terms of political and military achievements, the northern frontier was a land of 4 wars. Everyone's speed of accumulation was actually not slow. Under these circumstances, it was impossible for there to be so many empty positions waiting for you to be promoted. You either had to slowly accumulate experience or wait for an opportunity. Li Zhong's orders were an excellent opportunity. Being promoted 3 times in a row was not a small reward. For example, as long as a new recruit could complete this mission, he or she would be promoted to a deputy general. Even if his or her other achievements were not as good, he or she would still be promoted to a lieutenant, which was equivalent to becoming a boss of a region. Not to mention the other military ranks of the northern region, which were even higher ranked than the generals of the northern region. When all the people were rubbing their palms together, a strong man who was nearly 2 meters tall touched his nose and said with a smile, "Is there a more suitable troop than our Falling Star army in the northern frontier for a surprise attack?" Chapter 12:10. That's hard to say. The one who replied was a young man in his 20s. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. Although he was young, no one dared to underestimate him because his armor was as black as ink, and the word Blackwater was clearly engraved on his arm guard. He was the Blackwater Army, the personal army of the Dragon King in the northern frontier. "Old Wang, your Fallen Star army should just take a shower and go to bed for this mission." The young man raised his eyebrows, and a hideous smile appeared on his handsome face. He said loudly, "The Blackwater army was restructured, and all the commanders of the battalions were captains. But now, if you have enough military merits, you can apply for a special designation. Although you are under the name of the Blackwater Army, it is no different from leading an army alone. Even if I don't compete with you, the other captains of the Blackwater Army won't be blind." The brawny man snorted and carried a pair of huge black axes on his shoulder. He sneered and said, "Blind or not, we'll see when we get to the battlefield. Anyway, I don't believe that there is anyone better than us in terms of assault." If there was someone present, they would definitely recognize these 2 men. Cui Qingtai of the Fallen Star Army, level 7 Heaven Gang realm. He was born with great strength and he once tore apart demonic beasts of the same level. The pair of axes in his hands were also specially made by the Ministry of Works. If an ordinary person could use one of them, he or she would be a hero. But in his hands they were just 2 one-handed axes. It was said that Gao Buzhan thought highly of Cui Qingtai and intended to train him as his successor. After all, although Gao Chuanzhen was in his prime, he had served in the Fallen Star Army in his early years. As the champion of the army, he had to fight in the front line. His body was covered with injuries. If it were someone with a lower cultivation base, they would have died a long time ago. Plus, Yan Xingqi was already dead. Gao Chuanzhen already had the intention to leave. If it weren't for the fact that he had to leave the name of the Fallen Star Army, he would have already asked Li Zhong to leave. Li Shengkan of the Blackwater Army was a level 9 Heaven Dipper realm warrior. Although he didn't have any special talent, he was calm and cautious. He could command the 3 armies from the rear and he could also seize the flag. He was now the most dazzling new star in the Blackwater Army and was about to catch up with Zhao Guangchong to become the most ruthless man in the Blackwater Army. As for the Blackwater Army, there were 4 special names, which were the Azure Dragon, the Black Tortoise, the White Tiger, and the Rosefinch. Each special name was equal to the authority to lead an army. As the Blackwater army continued to expand, the size of the special names would also increase. If it was necessary, they could even leave the Blackwater army and form a new army. The Azure Dragon army would be the main commander, which would completely replace the Northern army. The Northern army would become a secondary army, responsible for the local security. The Black Tortoise army would be the main commander, which would complement the Azure Dragon camp. However, their main responsibility was to suppress the demonic beasts in the Hengduan mountain range and the various Sumeru worlds and mysterious realms that Lin Yuan had discovered in the northern frontier. This was to prevent the northern frontier from being defenseless when something unexpected happened. The White Tiger army was in charge of killing. They were responsible for entering the Hengduan mountain range and Sumeru worlds and slaughtering the species that were bred in them to ensure the normal operation of those places. At the same time, they would not allow the enemy to expand too much and affect the development of the northern frontier. Lastly, the Rosefinch army was in charge of annihilation. It would be the army that carried out the fewest missions but the most difficult missions in the Blackwater army in the future. They were mainly responsible for all external battles, including but not limited to destroying other dynasties and uncontrollable Sumeru worlds. Li Shenqian had his eyes on the name of the Rosefinch army. At the very least, he had to get the name of the White Tiger. After all, it was widely rumored in the Blackwater army that he was the little Zhao Guangchong, and Zhao Guangchong was the big Li Shenqian. It was not that he did not respect his seniors, but the army had always respected the strong. When the gap between them was not large, no one would be willing to be under someone else for the rest of their life, let alone a soldier. Li Shenqian and Zhao Guangchong were members of the Blackwater army in the same batch. Their cultivation, military rank, age, and aptitude were about the same. However, because Zhao Guangchong had become famous earlier, Li Shenqian was like a junior imitating his seniors. This made him very vexed. Therefore, he had made up his mind to get the special designation, and he had to get it before Zhao Guangchong. In the future, people would call Zhao Guangchong Little Li Shenqian. How comfortable would that be? Come on, Li Shenqian. Don't argue with me here. Cui Qingtai sneered. He rolled his eyes and said, "Don't forget that Zhao Guangchong and his subordinates are now on the Frost Mirror grassland. I reckon that while you are still thinking of a battle plan, they have already set off with their men. When you and your brothers arrive, you will be helping Zhao Guangchong clean up the battlefield." It had to be said that Cui Qingtai was nearly 2 meters tall and had bulging muscles. He looked like a human-shaped bear, but when it came to playing tricks, he was not bad at all. Hearing this, Li Xuanzan's expression changed. He turned and ran back to his encampment. As he ran, he shouted, "You stupid bull! If I don't make it in time for this battle, I will beat you up until you can't walk for half a month." After Li Shenqian left, the sneer on Cui Qingtai's face gradually disappeared. He joked, "Hey little brat, if those demon beasts were so easy to deal with, would the king of the northern frontier give such an order? Do you think it's so easy to be promoted by 3 ranks? Forget it, with your IQ, you should obediently go to our fallen star army. When the time comes, I will share some of the soup with you." However, what Cui Qingtai did not know was that after leaving his line of sight, the anxiety on Li Xuanzan's face also quickly disappeared. He sneered, "You stupid bull, do you really think I fell for your provocation? If you dare to follow me to the border, I will show you the unique skill of the front army turning into the rear army. Let's see who will be the one to take the thunder." If an instructor from the Northern Frontier Military Academy was here, he would probably be speechless. These 2 idiots applied to the military academy. It was King waste of talent. If you like to scheme so much, are you sure you don't want to study at the military academy for 2 years? What the hell did you learn? Li Shenqian and Cui Qingtai were just a microcosm of the current Northern Frontier military. Everyone was eagerly waiting for Li Zhong's order. It was just like how the emperor in Lin Yuan's previous life would post an imperial notice and invite doctors to treat his illness. Regardless of whether there were dates or not, everyone would be happy if they won. If they lost, they would have to start all over again. However, there was one thing. The demon beasts in the Hengduan mountain range had really touched the bottom line of the northern frontier. From Li Zhong to the recruits, almost everyone was filled with killing intent toward the demon beasts in the Frost Mirror grassland. Even the demon beasts that were galloping in the Frost Mirror grassland did not know how terrifying they were about to face. Chapter 12:11. The change in the Hengduan Mountains was obviously beyond everyone's expectations. Even the assassin who had planned all of this slapped his head hard. Damn it, why? He had gone through a lot of trouble to find 2 suitable carriers and paid such a huge price to secretly transport some water from the Nether Blood Sea under the nose of old ancestor Yang Mei. He had even stolen a trace of Hanba's origin corpse chi. Only then was he able to cultivate the 2 ferocious corpses, Heavenly Venerable Pudu the Killer and World-Cleansing Buddha. In the end, before the Withered Tree Empire completely collapsed, a corpse king that was not inferior to them was born and formed a new Withered Tree Empire. Although this new Withered Tree Empire was a corpse demon version, the problem was that the new corpse king was also holding back the slaughtering Heavenly Lord Pudu and the purifying Buddha. The current Withered Tree Empire could be said to be a tripartite balance of forces. Although the demons were rampant and there was no place for the living to stand, it still did not achieve the effect of collapse that he had expected. This also meant that the northern frontier could still maintain the original strategy. Therefore, in a moment of desperation, Baigan had even made preparations to leave the Withered Tree Empire to the Corpse King and let the purifying Buddha and the slaughtering Heavenly Lord lead the controlled Corpse Demon army to the northern frontier and turn the northern frontier into a purgatory on earth. The result? Good heavens! The people he had sent to the Withered Tree Empire to deliver the message were torn to shreds by the Hengduan Mountains beast tide halfway through the journey. As for refining the demon beasts of the Hengduan Mountains into corpse demons, even Baigan did not dare to think about it. After all, the demon beasts' bodies were too strong, and their immunity in all aspects was also directly maxed out. The price and time spent to refine a demon beast into a corpse demon was enough to refine thousands of humans of the same level into corpse demons. Unless Hanba came personally. Otherwise, it was almost an impossible task to refine a demon beast into a corpse demon. The Hengduan Mountains beast tide was not something the current corpse demon army could contend against. Perhaps even the clan leaders who started this beast tide did not know about it. Their actions could be said to have angered the public, directly destroying the plans of the northern frontier and the heavenly court, making both sides angry. An hour later, the Great Wall of the northern frontier was opened. A large number of armored soldiers with sharp blades passed through the ruined pass and charged at the demon beasts that were wreaking havoc on the Frost Mirror grassland. Even the smallest of these troops was led by a field captain, while the larger ones were at the level of an army. To the officers of the northern frontier who had climbed to the middle and upper ranks, a promotion of 3 ranks was a huge temptation. After all, Li Zhong had no intention of restricting the original ranks of the participants. Therefore, the scope of operation of the various troops was greatly expanded. After all, when a recruit was promoted by 3 ranks, it would only be a recruit becoming a lieutenant. At this stage, as long as they were willing to work hard, their promotion wouldn't be too slow. But if the guard general was promoted 3 times in a row, wouldn't he be able to take flight? Under this kind of atmosphere, almost every army's bounty was directly maxed out. If someone observed the Frost Mirror grassland carefully, they would see that there were killings everywhere. The troops of the northern frontier were encircling and suppressing the beast tide, and the beast tide was attacking the barracks of the northern frontier. In some places, the demon beasts of the Hengduan Mountains were still killing each other. Even the grassland wolf tribe that had been hiding from the world for a long time came out and encircled a large territory on the Frost Mirror grassland. Not to mention the Frost Mirror grassland, even the Donglin city and other places that were slightly behind could smell the pungent smell of blood. Almost every day, countless disciples of the School of Medicine were on standby at the northern frontier. Anyone who had some common knowledge about medicine knew that, if left alone for a long time, it was hard to say what kind of evils the uncollected corpses and the soaring blood would breed, but a plague that was enough to destroy mortals and low-level cultivators was unavoidable. The troops of the northern frontier and the demon beasts that were fighting on the grassland didn't really care. After all, their cultivation was still there. The plague would only make them feel a little uncomfortable and unable to exert their full combat ability. However, the School of Medicine was worried that the terrifying plague might accidentally spread to the northern frontier when the soldiers were relieved of their duties. Otherwise, even if the demon beasts of the Hengduan Mountains attacked the northern frontier directly, they wouldn't be able to cause the losses that the plague would bring. In the sky, a figure with disheveled hair was standing in the clouds. Her gray eyes were rolling slightly, and she glanced at the grassland that was strewn with corpses. Even with her temperament, she almost lost control of her rationality and rushed down to feast. After suppressing her bloodlust with great difficulty, Hanba's gray eyes regained their clarity. After muttering to herself for a moment, she cast her gaze in the direction of the northern frontier. She muttered, What's going on? Did that black Jiao not receive my message? Myths were actually very mysterious. Just like how the true path of cultivation was to absorb the power of incense, the more believers one had, the more powerful the legend would be. As the saying went, man strives for a breath, Buddha strives for a stick of incense. There were stories of immortals and Buddhas fighting until the sun and moon lost their light for a stick of incense. In the original legends, the true zombie progenitor was her, Hanba. She was personally refined by the Yellow Emperor into the world's first zombie in order to deal with the great formation of bitter wind and bitter rain. As the later generations continued to change, she went from the original heavenly goddess Hanba to the Hanba that everyone hated. And that wasn't the end. What was even more ridiculous was that people had created 3 other zombie progenitors, namely Ingo, Hoqing, and Jiangchen. They were all as strong as her, and had been created from nothing to become one of the 4 zombie progenitors. But the truly terrifying thing was that, over the course of countless years, Hanba discovered that the other 3 zombie progenitors really did appear in the primitive world. Humans had always been the subjects that deities and Buddhas fought over. It wasn't just because they could provide the power of incense, but because they could indeed create gods and become gods. Thus, the existing deities and Buddhas had to make humans believe in them. It wasn't just for the sake of becoming stronger, but more so because they didn't want the world to have more deities and Buddhas. Moreover, the disciples of the Confucian sect who respected Hongzhuan's decree were even more extreme in their prohibition against becoming gods. In other words, Confucius did not speak of strange powers or gods. This sentence could be interpreted in any way. In Lin Yuan's previous world, during the Age of Chaos, this was called rejecting feudal superstitions. In an era where demons ran rampant, this was called lying through one's teeth. The main purpose was to tell the world that it was enough to just believe in the existing deities and Buddhas. There was no need to make up stories about strange immortals and ghosts. Even stories about demons and monsters seeking to become gods didn't end well for humans who followed the demons' wishes. Even a serious illness would be considered a good thing. Chapter 12:12. However, as the Yellow Emperor's beloved daughter, Hanba was one of the 4 zombie progenitors alongside the other 3. According to ancient records, Hanba could still evolve into a Ho. What kind of existence was Ho? It was one of the first life forms born after Pangu split open the skies. According to the legends, Ingo and Hoqing had been tricked by Dunglong's soul into becoming the zombie progenitors. Jiangchen had also become the zombie progenitor after combining with Roar's corpse. In a world where the laws of the underworld were clear, the relationship between the undead and the undead was extremely simple. The undead were forever the slaves of the transformed. This was the new ability that Jiangchen had given the zombies. Most of the zombies in movies and TV series were the descendants of Hoqing and Jiangchen. Although Hanba and Ingo both gave the Yellow Emperor a lot of trouble, they had no intention of expanding the zombie race. Instead, after Hoqing's death, they established one of the rules that allowed zombies to truly reproduce. That is, anyone who died with a grudge could become a zombie. Jiangchen's unique ability to spread corpse poison by sucking blood and turning those who were sucked into his own slaves. It was another rule that allowed zombies to reproduce. Although Hanba hadn't reached the stage of transforming into a Ho, countless years had passed. She was now unfathomable. Even a quasi-sage expert might not be able to do anything to her. Therefore, Hitorigami was very clear that in such an environment, once Baigan released his corpse chi, it would at least give birth to a large number of flying zombies and wandering zombies. If luck was particularly bad, it might even give birth to unmelted skeletons. Everlasting skeletons were the highest level zombies could reach. At this level, they were immortal and indestructible. They truly transcended the 3 realms, 5 elements, and 6 paths of reincarnation. Even immortals in the heavens would fear them. But what was that Black Jiao doing now? She clearly knew that Baigan had already unleashed his source corpse chi, yet he was still fighting a fierce battle with a demon beast at the Frost Mirror grasslands so close to the Withered Wood dynasty. Under the temptation of the smell of blood, even she could barely restrain herself. If an evil spirit was born, even the Black Flood Dragon would be forced to use its trump card, and it might not even be able to deal with the evil spirit. When it came to bloodthirsty desires, Hitorigami felt a little helpless. In the beginning, zombies didn't drink blood or eat meat. Instead, they fed on resentment, baleful energy, and yin energy. However, with a series of upheavals in the future in some movies, TV series, novels, and so on, zombies and vampires were mixed together, forming a new terrifying image. After the legend began to spread, The impact caused by this was that zombies really began to feed on blood, just like when she was scolded by countless people as the drought demon in the past, she really gained the magical power of thousands of miles of red land? Could it be? A hint of bewilderment flashed through Hitorigami's dead gray eyes. He muttered, that Black Jiao isn't at the northern frontier. Moreover, he hasn't been able to contact the northern frontier after receiving my message, right? It couldn't be that the Black Jiao wanted to use his corpse chi to cultivate an extremely terrifying corpse demon, could it? What a joke. Zombies were a collection of bad luck, resentment, and baleful energy. Anyone who was tainted with the karma of zombies would end up in a bad situation. Even the destiny of a human king couldn't suppress the corrosion of the corpse chi. Even if that Black Jiao had the guts to do something like this, right? In fact, Lin Yuan didn't have any intention of paying attention to the outside world at this moment. He just sat in his own palace, silently looking at the update progress bar that had exceeded 99%. There was a hint of helplessness in his eyes. The system hadn't moved for 10F** king minutes. Did it crash when the update was almost done? Was it specially designed to mess with his mentality? However, the estimated time soon arrived, and the system's update progress bar was finally full. Ding. Congratulations to the host for completing the system's version 3.0 update. This update will cancel a portion of the old functions, and at the same time unlock some new functions. The host still needs to explore the specific content himself. Next, the mission reward will be issued. Almost at the instant the system appeared, Lin Yuan suddenly felt as if a layer of shackles on his body had been broken. The world in front of him started to become incomparably clear. If he squinted his eyes slightly, he could even see the flow of heaven and earth spiritual chi. From this moment onwards, Lin Yuan clearly realized that he had completed the evolution from mortal to immortal. If this was in a novel, the difference between a cultivator and an immortal was only one lightning tribulation. However, in reality this was a leap in the level of life. The current Lin Yuan could no longer call himself a human, even if he shed his demonic body and revealed his human body. With a thought, the surrounding air began to explode. Layer after layer of terrifying power overflowed, as if announcing that an incomparably powerful, immortal, had descended upon the world. As a cultivator of the orthodox cultivation system, Lin Yuan could already achieve immortality after advancing from the desolate demon realm to the demon king realm. Compared to the evolution obtained by the natives of the Tianwu world through the castrated version of the cultivation method, as long as he could pass through the 3 calamities and 9 tribulations, he would be able to achieve immortality. There was no need for him to use the power of incense to maintain his existence. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He suddenly realized a problem. The dragons of the Tianwu world should also be existences from the great desolate world. Moreover, there were several dragon gods who called themselves ancestral dragons. Furthermore, they had joined the ancient Fey court at its peak. Logically speaking, the dragons of the 4 seas should also cultivate the most orthodox cultivation method. Why were these ancestral dragons of the 4 seas also using the power of incense to maintain their immortality? Something's not right, something's not right. Lin Yuan lowered his head and muttered to himself. His eyes were somewhat gloomy. The dragons of the Tianwu world were like the great cultivators of the Great Desolate World in the early days of the Great Desolate World. They seemed to have immortality and could summon the wind and rain, but in reality, they cultivated crazily every day, accumulating magic power and sharpening their Tao hearts. Every 500 years they would undergo the 3 calamities. If they could endure it, they would continue to endure it. If they could not, their souls would scatter. The only meaning of their existence was to spread their faith to Hongjun. Countless years later, Hongjun raised his hand, and coincidentally, a few geniuses with extraordinary talent appeared and improved their cultivation method. These dragons of the 4 seas, either they did not come from the Great Desolate World, or they were hiding some big secret. It had to be known that in the myriad of worlds, the dragons were not only found in the Great Desolate World. However, no matter which world the dragons were from, they were definitely existences at the top of the food chain. In fact, most of the worlds were ruled by the dragons. Even the later humans had many inheritances from the dragons. Chapter 12-13. Logically speaking, the dragon race was an incomparably powerful race. No matter which world it was in, it would be an absolute powerhouse. Perhaps there were a few special life forms that could surpass the dragon race with their own strength, but in terms of overall quality, there was no race that could be compared to the dragon race. Would such a race be like the natives of the Tianwu world, losing their inheritance because of the world's restrictions and laws? False dragon. Thinking of this, two large words suddenly appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. For the current dragon race of the Four Seas, these two words were incomparably appropriate. Although the dragon race of the Tianwu world ruled the endless sea, suppressing the native monsters for countless years, the dragon race of the Four Seas had lost their inheritance. Even if they crazily talked about bloodlines, the dragon race of the Four Seas could be said to be incomparably thin. Lin Yuan, who was at the level of a flood dragon in terms of bloodline density, was even above the Dragon King. Were these guys really from the dragon race? If not, where were the real dragon race now? Logically speaking, although Lin Yuan had never seen the whale race, they were able to dominate the endless sea, and even a member of the whale race could eat up all the life in the sea. In addition, there were huge sea monsters in the depths of the endless sea. Under such an environment, the whale race would definitely not lose to any other force. In a small world where strength was limited, the whale race was definitely an overlord existence. Every member was estimated to have touched the threshold of immortal, just by relying on this group of false dragons? To put it bluntly, even the dragon gods worshipped in the Dragon God Palace were at best on the same level as the whale race. It was hard to say how many members of the whale race there were in their heyday. After all, the more powerful the race, the more difficult it was to reproduce. Unless it was a special race like the dragon race that did not have reproductive isolation and could give birth to children with any creature, their numbers would generally not be too many. However, to be able to rule the vast endless sea, their numbers would not be too small. If the dragon race of the Four Seas had conquered the endless sea, then the number of ancestral dragons worshipped in the Dragon God Palace would definitely not be less than thousands of ancestral dragons. Taking a deep breath, he hid this idea in his heart. Moreover, after the system update was completed, Lin Yuan always felt that there were several pairs of eyes staring at him from behind. However, Lin Yuan was unable to perceive any emotions from these lines of sight. It seemed that they were neither kind nor malicious to him, so Lin Yuan was unable to capture their existence. He only had a vague premonition. Even if his consciousness was immersed in them, the other party would quickly break off this link. It was impossible to determine the other party's identity at all. He just felt that they were very unfamiliar but somewhat close. Could it be a real dragon? Hiding in the dark to observe me? Lin Yuan laughed involuntarily. However, he soon remembered the important matter. System, open my attribute panel. With a thought, Lin Yuan took the initiative to interact with the system. Attribute panel function activated. Identity verified. Name, Lin Yuan. Serial number, 021. Title, Devourer of National Fate. Status, Blackwater Nether Flood Dragon mutated. Divine title, Northern Frontier Dragon King unconferred. Divine power, 0 believers, 300000000. Joss Flame power, 3219758001. The host has officially reached the celestial level. The attribute model has been removed. From now on, the various attributes of the host will no longer exist separately. The divine power column represents the host's current combat power. Every point of divine power is equivalent to the full power of a peak Baron Demon Realm expert. Note 2. Divine power is a one-time consumable item. It can be exchanged with Joss Flame power. The exchange rate is 1/10,000. Note 3. The number of believers of the host is only in round numbers. Every believer will provide the host with a point of Joss Flame power every day. Lin Yuan. For a moment he did not know whether this update was good or bad for the original attribute model to be removed. However, according to the system's usual behavior, the so-called peak Baron Demon Realm was the average. In other words, it was the power of an ordinary demon beast after entering the Baron Demon Realm. It could not be compared to a special existence like Guan Zhaoshan. However, the flaw could not obscure the beauty of the jade. 1 point of Joss Flame power was equivalent to the full power of a peak Baron Demon Realm expert. Then, if it exchanged all of its 320 million Joss Flame power for divine power, it could probably destroy the heavens and earth with a single move. The only troublesome thing was that divine power could not be regenerated. It was like the water in a bucket. Once it was spilled, it would be spilled. It would not be placed anywhere, and a new bucket would appear after a while. This was the biggest difference between celestials and mortals. Ordinary demons and cultivators had an upper limit. However, the demonic power and earth energy in their bodies were renewable resources. Whether it was through consuming pills to recover or waiting for them to recover naturally, it would not be a big problem even if they exhausted all their energy. However, if Celestials used up all of their Joss flame power, they would be as weak as a mortal. They were not good at prolonged and attritional battles. Lin Yuan suddenly understood the Celestials that he had seen in movies and books in his previous life. They were either insufferably arrogant and used all kinds of methods to rule over humans, beating the so-called heroes and experts until they could not fight back at all. After a while, a weak mortal could kill them with a knife. A celestial that had exhausted all of his divine power was indeed worse than a mortal. Although Lin Yuan had broken through, if he did not exchange for divine power, he would not be much stronger than an ordinary black python. Lin Yuan suddenly widened his eyes. He thought again and growled, "Where the F***ck are my skills? Did you eat my skills?" The system first typed in ellipsis. After a while the system explained faintly, "Skills? No, at this stage only God ability level methods will be recorded in the system, and they will not be mixed together with the personal panel. If the host wants to check, then the God ability panel can be opened on your own. Open the divine power panel." Lin Yuan continued to communicate with the system. At the same time his heart suddenly sank. Only divine power level methods will be recorded? Didn't this mean that many of his skills had been deleted? It should be known that although some skills could not be considered divine powers, if used properly, they were still quite powerful. For example, Curse, Seal, Poison, Void's Embrace. These were all skill level methods. They were purely some kind of force exertion technique or the secretion of poison through one's organs. However, without the skill panel, Lin Yuan could manually copy these skills. In theory it was possible, but in reality, it was a big problem. Lin Yuan might not be unable to use special force exertion techniques. Chapter 12:14. But like Void Embrace, he had to accurately cut the space, hide his figure and breath, control the place where he appeared, and cause effective damage to the target. This skill could have even been used as a unique skill, but if Lin Yuan used it now, it was basically something that he could not accurately control and was doomed to fail. As for the curse mark Poison, Lin Yuan had evolved this skill in Poison Gland. Even without the skill he could still secrete the curse mark Poison in theory. But this thing was like medicine. Once the combination of herbs changed or even the ratio of herbs changed, the good medicine used to cure diseases and save people would instantly become a fatal poison. Lin Yuan could not control the ratio. After all, he did not need to poison anyone. He just needed to control some people who were temporarily useful through the curse mark Poison. He had to control the dosage to ensure that he could kill the other party while suppressing the outbreak of the poison through the other party's strength. To deal with existences of different realms, the ratio of the curse mark Poison was different. After losing the precise control of the system, Lin Yuan had to do a lot of crazy experiments if he wanted to continue using the curse mark Poison. Magical ability panel activated. Identity verified. Dragon King's Eye can expand divine power to explore the surrounding environment. The more divine power invested, the larger the range of perception. Can detect the attributes of all creatures within the range of perception. There is a certain chance of failure. Failure will cause the other party to view you with hostility or even hatred. King of Water, omitted Formless Ice, omitted Blood Sacrifice Prayer, omitted Celestial Body. The host can control the size of his body at will and obtain bonuses according to his current form. For example, if the host shrinks his body, it will bring a bonus in agility and reaction. If the host shrinks his body, it will bring a bonus in strength and defense. The specific bonus value will change according to the divine power invested by the host. Dragon Power, omitted Nether River Control. As the host kills more and more creatures, the originally small water droplet has now become a large river. Any existence that is caught in it will become the host's most loyal servant. The host can spend divine power to summon Nether River creatures out of thin air. The host can also spend a large amount of divine power to fix the Nether River in a certain place in the current world and summon Nether River creatures unconditionally. All things have soul. Omitted Roaming Dragon's 9 Transformations. A treasure manual that integrates soft attacks, movement techniques, power dissipation, cultivation, and other aspects into one. As long as the user receives the host's approval, the user will be able to cultivate the Roaming Dragon's 9 Transformations, regardless of the user's species or cultivation level. However, the host will have to pay a corresponding amount of divine power for each person it imparts to. Lin Yuan, WDNMD. This damned system had kept his innate ability and turned it into a divine ability. but in reality there wasn't much change. Furthermore, it had added a prerequisite of consuming divine power. This kind of behavior could be described in one sentence: reaching out for money from under the coffin. What was even more frightening was that this bastard had directly deleted all of his skills. If he wanted to use skills in the future, he could only use his own consciousness to perform microcontrol. Who knew how long it would take for him to perfectly replicate those skills? After the update, the system became stronger, but the requirement for the power of incense had increased. In terms of actual combat, Lin Yuan had exchanged the power of incense for divine power. Not only was the power of the power more powerful, but it could also reduce wastage. After all, if one wanted to directly mobilize the power of incense to achieve the effect of divine power, there would be a loss of close to 30% of the power in the process of releasing it. However, the updated system had indeed dealt a heavy blow to Lin Yuan. To him, who did not have a large source of incense, this was like a thunderstorm. Out of the 30 million power of incense a day, most of them were system creatures created by the gray-scaled flood dragon person and Lin Yuan. It was estimated that there were only a few million existences who truly believed in Lin Yuan and treated Lin Yuan as a god. To the current northern frontier with a population of over 10 billion, this ratio was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. Letting out a long sigh, an indescribable expression flashed across Lin Yuan's eyes. After a short moment, he once again communicated with the system telepathically, saying, "You've paid such a great price. Could it be that you're just trying to exploit some incense from me?" Patience. You must be patient. In this update, the system has brought the host a very important function: the trading market. If the system had a physical body, it would probably have rolled its eyes by now. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. Then he casually waved his flood dragon tail and said, "Open the trading market. I'd like to see what kind of model you're so fond of." The system update this time was most likely because of what Lin Yuan had said earlier. Therefore, the system had paid a certain price to undergo an update. While it might not be able to break the current situation, it would definitely give Lin Yuan a chance to break the current situation. Therefore, this trading market was probably not simple. It might even be one of the core functions of the system. The trading market has been opened. Identity verification is correct. As the system once again displayed these words, Lin Yuan could not help but frown slightly. He said, "Identity verification? What does that mean?" Regardless of whether it was his personal interface, the mystical abilities interface, or the trading market now, the system always seemed to say something before it was opened. The current version 3.0 system is different from before. The biggest difference can be understood by the host as the difference between a network and a standalone system. In version 3.0, the host can pay incense power to customize a subsystem, which is the previous version 2.0 system. The host can also install the subsystem to others according to the host's wishes. The price of customization is 1 million incense power. After each customization, the price of the next customization will double. The life form that obtains the subsystem will have the same authority as the host. The host is equivalent to the server and can issue missions, rewards, and punishments, but must abide by the restrictions of the rules. Unless the host voluntarily pays a price to temporarily block the perception of the rules, the mission will fail. At the same time, the host can also set up an AI assistant for the subsystem. According to the host's aptitude, temperament, and other factors, the host can create a personal growth plan for them. The subsystem will issue goals, missions, and so on. Of course, the rewards of the missions will be paid by the host, or by the system using incense power. With the separation of the main system and the subsystem, the authority will change. In order to prevent bugs, the identity verification is required every time the function of version 3.0 is activated. If the authority is insufficient, the function will fail, and the system will issue missions to other hosts to carry out erasure. Therefore, verifying the identity before activating the model is to protect the host's rights. Chapter 12:15. After hearing the system's explanation, Lin Yuan subconsciously nodded and did not continue to dwell on this matter. Regarding the system's functions, it could be said that it was reasonable, but also unexpected. Even Lin Yuan himself did not think that the system would actually give him such authority. This was no different from handing over the system's core to him. However, after thinking about it carefully, the other hosts probably did not have such authority. After all, after the system's update, what kind of room it opened was completely up to the system. It was not a real AI, it was just pretending to be the system's seed to help it quickly grow. Even if the system was updated, it would still make changes according to the host's potential, rating, and style, just like how it made plans for every host's growth. And the reason why Lin Yuan received this privilege? It was completely because the system saw hope in him to defeat Hong Jun. In addition, Lin Yuan had always been obedient and did not listen to the system. Only when there was a win-win situation would Lin Yuan do it without hesitation. If it was like what the system had thought before, it would obviously abandon Lin Yuan and still want Lin Yuan to fight for the Sky Marshal World secret mission. Lin Yuan would rather die than do that. Therefore, the relationship between the system and Lin Yuan was one where the system was strong and Lin Yuan was weak, but it was not a master-servant relationship. Now, Lin Yuan already had the ability to create god power after leaving the system. Naturally, the relationship between the two of them was not one of strength and one of weakness. It could be said that they were absolutely equal partners. The system needed Lin Yuan to deal with Hong Jun. Lin Yuan needed the system to provide convenience. In addition, Lin Yuan cultivated the life scripture, which was one of the reasons why the system took the initiative to give him this privilege. There were only so many resources in a world. Even the system itself had to follow the model of one host in one world. However, Lin Yuan could continuously cultivate living beings to plunder other worlds. Firstly, it could train, and secondly, it could strengthen the Sky Marshal world. With the system's help, these living beings would be like fish in water in other worlds. When Lin Yuan became strong, he would naturally become the main force against Hong Jun. While attracting most of the firepower from the Great Desolate World, it would also give the system time and space to cultivate other hosts. Thinking about that, Lin Yuan no longer hesitated and said, "All right, tell me about the functions of the exchange." The exchange, as the name suggests, is a virtual space opened up by the system for the hosts to trade. However, it is different from the system's previous transactions. The price of the items in the exchange and the number of merchants are all up to the host to decide. The system will only collect the transportation fee for the items sent. Other than that, there will be no other interference. The host serial number is 021. Because the host is the 21st to upgrade to version 3. 0, that is to say, in the current exchange only the 21 of you have the right to trade. However, this does not mean that the other hosts are unable to trade. The other hosts' goods will also enter the exchange. However, the price of these goods will be set by the system. The same goes for the transaction price. After the transaction is successful, the supplier of the goods will not receive any benefits, because before the transaction, the system has already bought out all the goods. What a guy. Hearing that, Lin Yuan directly called him an expert. What the hell is this? This was an otherworldly fantasy version of a high-tech profiteer. Other than Lin Yuan, who was aware of the system's original identity, the other hosts probably thought that they were the protagonists of novels. Even if they communicated with the system, they probably thought that it was a cold intelligent program. Whatever price the system gave, they would sell it. They would not even think of bargaining with the system. Plus, they really did not need those things, so they would definitely sell them. When the system later listed these things in the exchange, good lord, 100 times profit would probably be a good price. May there be no profiteers in heaven. After teasing the system, Lin Yuan's blue and white eyes flashed. The next moment, it was as if a sea of stars appeared in Lin Yuan's eyes. If one stared at it closely, one could even see the flickering of stars. At the same time, Lin Yuan's consciousness had also arrived in a strange space. To his left, right, and even behind him was a vast expanse of darkness. There was only a huge brightly lit market in front of him. It was antique and did not have any modern vibes. It was like a bustling market in ancient times. There were only shops with a dazzling lineup of goods, and the streets outside the shops were densely packed with people. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Lin Yuan only glanced at the densely packed crowd and felt his scalp go numb. He even had a premonition that any one of these people had the strength to casually kill him. In other words, any one of these people could easily kill an immortal. These people didn't seem to be surprised by his sudden appearance. They continued to walk slowly on the street. Some of them even entered the shops to choose goods. They didn't bargain at all. If they fancied something, they would directly go to the counter to trade. From time to time, there would be people who disappeared. Didn't you say that including me, only 21 people have opened the exchange? I didn't tell you that I was the one who created this trading market. Lin Yuan, WDNMD. The system's words almost choked him to death. Good lord, it's not even your F***king thing. How can you treat it as a major update for version 3.0? When it comes to shamelessness, I won't even support a wall. I admire you. Let me reintroduce it to you. The exchange is a special space that exists in the sea of misery. It is still a mystery who created it. However, you can understand every shop here as the owner behind it is the heavenly axiom of a world. The employees are like the chosen ones, like the host. If you are willing, I can also pay you a generous monthly salary. The condition is that you work in my shop. The specific work content depends on what position you are assigned to. If you lack incense and a stable source, I suggest you consider it. Alright, you can't enter this space physically. Even existences like Yang Mei and Hongjun can't. Anyone who enters the exchange can only use their consciousness. It is not impossible to fight here, but it is basically a battle of divine power and consciousness. For those who only have strong physical bodies, it is a hellish existence. Fortunately, killing and robbing are not allowed here. Otherwise, races like the witch tribe with strong physical bodies but no primordial spirit would not dare to come here. Chapter 12:16. Lin Yuan? Fighting here was a battle between divine power and divine consciousness. Lin Yuan could understand this point, because Lin Yuan was not in the body of a flood dragon now, but the appearance of his previous life. He was a tall and well-proportioned young man with an above-average appearance. He was wearing an expensive handmade suit, which was the outfit he wore when his company went public in his previous life. After rising to glory, he was attacked by his enemies by any means necessary, and his subsequent life was like a nightmare. Therefore, Lin Yuan had long realized that he was only a consciousness in the trading market. But the system's words, he could enter here without a primordial spirit? But soon Lin Yuan felt relieved. Not having a primordial spirit did not mean that he did not have consciousness. You're right. In this space, all existences are bodies of consciousness. If you're killed here, you'll only lose a strand of consciousness. It won't hurt you. However, you still have to abide by the rules here. This is because all the shops here are opened by the heavenly axioms of various worlds. They're for the sake of mutual exchange and bringing in trends. If you casually fight here and ruin other people's business, you will be boycotted by the heavenly Tao of each world. At that time, even if you are not tainted by karma, you will be haunted by misfortune until you die. Only immortal saints who have cultivated thousands of tribulations can save their lives. Of course, if you are not killed, this misfortune will be shared equally with your subordinates and relatives. For specific details, you can refer to the Western sect. However, if you have a conflict with others here, it is not impossible to solve it. For example, there is a huge arena in the center of this space. As long as you pay a certain amount of spiritual items or divine power, you can enter the arena. The arena manager will take the handling fee, but if you can win, the other party's payment will still belong to you. In addition to resolving conflicts and grievances, this arena will also often hold competitions. There is even a special boxing arena. It is similar to the boxing arena in Hong Kong's Jiulong walled city in your previous life. The geniuses of each world will often participate in similar arenas. Although a consciousness will be destroyed if you die here, it can also sharpen your divine consciousness and nourish your primordial spirit. Moreover, as long as you do not participate too frequently, your life will not be in danger. If you are interested, you can also try. That arena is also... Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of the arena. That's not it. It said that when this space appeared, the arena already existed. It should have been set up by the one who created this space. Although I don't know what that person's original purpose was, this is its current function. As for the arena manager, it's just an AI program left behind by that person. We have no right to interfere with the arena. At most, some heavenly axiom would set up a boxing arena to earn some divine power to nurture their chosen one. Oh. Lin Yuan nodded and walked into the market. Standing outside the trading market and inside the trading market were two completely different experiences. Almost the moment Lin Yuan stepped into the trading market, he felt an invisible pressure enveloping him. When he subconsciously raised his head to see where this pressure came from, he only saw dark clouds. From time to time he could see lightning surging, but not a drop of rain fell. There was also no thunder in his ears. It was as if the dark clouds above his head were just an illusion. That is the heavenly tribulation thunder cloud. It is also something that has existed in this space since ancient times. I have seen many foreign existences who have mistakenly entered and wanted to devour the consciousness that entered the trading market and rob the goods sold in various shops. In the end, they were directly annihilated by the heavenly tribulation thunder cloud. Even the existence of a saint was directly annihilated, and it is the kind that can't be reborn. Therefore, everyone unanimously believes that the existence who created this space is probably above the saints. It is even a great existence that can stand shoulder to shoulder with the 3,000 great Tao. Not to mention us heavenly axioms, even the ancient gods and demons who are carriers of the great Tao would probably not be able to withstand one move from that existence. This is also an important factor for this space to be able to become a trading market. No one can cause trouble here. Moreover, the heavenly tribulation thunderclouds in various worlds are actually clumsy imitations of the heavenly axioms of various worlds. The Eldritch world is still okay. After all, it is a world that contains the 3,000 great Tao. It is much stronger than the ordinary upper-class world. Therefore there are 3 disasters and 9 disasters. It is not like the ordinary world where there is only heavenly tribulation from beginning to end, an existence above the saints? A thunderbolt annihilated a saint? This was not done by the other party personally. Just a heavenly tribulation thundercloud left in this space had such power. Hearing this, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly lit up. The existence who created this space was really terrifying. However, such an existence was incomparably fascinating. Strolling in the market, Lin Yuan's gaze swept across the shops. The surprise in his eyes became more and more intense. The goods here could be described as a dazzling lineup. The small ones were useless decorations, the big ones were heaven-destroying treasures, and even the items that could help cultivators comprehend the great Tao were not few in number. Compared to this, the Qianwu world's goods were pitifully low. It was estimated that it would only be better after the Qianwu world became a medium-class world. At that time, the world's level would be higher, and the heaven and earth spiritual objects it nurtured would be better. However, the Qianwu world's heavenly Tao had not been born yet, so it was not necessary to talk about this. The Qianwu world did not even have the qualifications to be looked down upon. What surprised Lin Yuan the most was that this space actually had the existence of a mercenary guild and a slave market. The former's existence also meant that as long as you could pay for it, you could quickly obtain the loyalty of a large number of experts. Although the quality was uneven, Lin Yuan was certain that if the Qianwu world became a medium-class world, such a group of mercenaries would descend from the sky and instantly sweep the world. However, Lin Yuan was only surprised for a moment. After all, by borrowing the power of the system, he could directly summon other hosts to help him. Similarly, by paying the same amount of divine power or Joss flames, the helpers he summoned were not only stronger but also more reassuring. In any case, everyone was truly on the same side. As for the slave market, although this thing had a misleading name, it was actually not anything improper. It mainly sold the young of special species from various worlds. By buying a batch of young and bringing them back to his own world, he could expand the food chain. If it was a mutated creature that had been domesticated since young, it could provide a considerable amount of strength when it matured. After a rough glance, Lin Yuan once again walked forward. According to the system's notification, its shop was not far away. Chapter 12:17. The shops Lin Yuan saw before were similar to small houses on both sides of a street. However, the system's shop was built at the end of the street. In other words, the original road forked in front of the system's shop, extending in a Y shape. Moreover, the system's shop was not a small house. Instead, it was an octagonal building that was 11 stories high and looked very colorful. In an instant, the style of the building was full. When he saw the system's shop, Lin Yuan finally realized how powerful the Eldritch world was. Those who could open a shop in this space were basically the heavenly Tao of a world. Although the size of the shops he saw along the way were different, the layout of the bungalows was completely different compared to the octagonal building. Lin Yuan glanced along the 2 forked streets. Most of them were also buildings. They could not be compared to the system's shop. They were either not as luxurious as the octagonal building, or not as tall as the octagonal building. They could only be said to be much better than the bungalows from before. Moreover, in terms of geographical location, none of them could be compared to the octagonal building. As everyone knew, there was only the world will in a minor kiliacosm at most. It could not be separated into the 3 realms and 6 paths. Therefore, those bungalows and shops should be in the middle kiliacosm, and the buildings should be in the greater kiliacosm. The Eldritch world's heavenly Tao belonged to the unique existence in the greater kiliacosm. Moreover, this was only an incomplete source of the Eldritch world's heavenly Tao. It was an existence similar to a stray dog. In comparison, the eldritch world's heavenly Tao at its peak was definitely an existence that could beat everything in this space. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yuan stepped into the octagonal building. With just a glance, Lin Yuan's movements became slightly stiff. The smell of a profiteer hit him in the face. There were only 2 employees on the first floor of the octagonal building. One stood in front of the counter to collect the bill, and the other stood quietly in front of a machine. The shelves around them were filled with a dazzling collection of colorful balls of light of different sizes. Lin Yuan? What's there to be surprised about? Haven't you seen stone gambling before? My way of playing is similar. The light balls here are all spiritual items from various worlds. It is the same from the first floor to the 4th floor. The color and size of the light balls are different, and the items inside are also different. However, the good-looking big light balls might contain trash, while the dim small light balls might contain treasures. Do you want to play a few rounds? Hearing this, Lin Yuan suddenly felt a little speechless. In his previous life he was also a member of the business world. There was only one sentence that could sum up the profession of a businessman: all businessmen are evil and all businessmen are evil. However, Lin Yuan really had never seen such a profiteer like the system. In his previous life, there was indeed a saying of stone gambling. According to the size, origin, texture, and so on, one could determine whether there was jade or gemstone inside a raw stone. Some people became rich overnight while others lost everything. Although 8 out of 10 people who gambled on stones lost money, at most they did not bring out the real good stones. Moreover, considering the reputation, they would always find a few people to support them. Occasionally there would be a lucky person. Moreover, on a technical level, they really could not control whether or not every raw stone could contain gemstones or jade. Things like experience often hurt people. However, the system's things were different. The balls of light wrapped around these goods were the power of the heavenly axiom, which was also converted from divine power. Ordinary people could not pry into them, but as for what was inside, it all depended on the system's mood. It was possible to spend tens of millions of divine power to open a red belly band. Anyway, the system used the power of the heavenly axiom to wrap the goods. If it wanted to, it could package the trash in any way it wanted. Moreover, it seemed that the shops here all displayed all kinds of goods in an orderly manner. No one played like the system. Only the heavens knew how many people this octagonal building had cheated. Lin Yuan's mouth twitched slightly. He said somewhat helplessly, "You didn't call me over just to tell me how much of a profiteer you are, right? Stinking brat, biting Lu Dongbin like a dog. You don't know how to appreciate good intentions." The system's quality displayed a sentence to Lin Yuan. Then, the system continued to display faintly, "I called you here to let you obtain the treasure." Gem? Lin Yuan was slightly startled. This was not what he had expected. Why did the system suddenly become so generous? The Qinwu world is about to be repaired. Now, the god of the underworld and the celestial emperor have candidates. Now, all the forces of the Qinwu continent are waiting for the world to contend for supremacy and choose a human king who can suppress the world for eternity. Although I am not sure how long it will take for the Qinwu continent to be unified, it will be at least a few years and at most 30 years. When the Qinwu continent is repaired and the world is upgraded, you and I have to prepare early. That is why I called you here today. I have a treasure here called the 3 Live Stone. After the world is repaired, you can use this treasure to slash out for a time and reach the cultivation of a sage-to-be. The 3 Live Stone? When he heard these 3 words, Lin Yuan felt as if someone had dropped a heavy bomb in his mind and detonated it. He only felt his mind go blank and even buzzing. Putting aside the mythological background, the 3 Live Stone was just a stone that symbolized the meaning of love. There were often scholars who recited poems and essays. The 3 Live Stone was soft and refined. After being polished, it could reveal patterns similar to wood grains or black dots. Hence, it was also known as the red sandalwood of the stone. After being polished, a large piece of stone could be formed into pictures of mountains, waterfalls, ancient trees, withered branches, birds and beasts, romantic figures, and so on. It was a strange stone that contained countless feelings of elegance and literary talent. But when it came to the mythological background, the 3 words 3 Live Stone were enough to make countless primordial creatures panic. According to the myths and legends, when Nuwa created humans, she would take a grain of sand and use it as a counting tool for each doll she created. Over time, the sand would form a stubborn stone. This was the predecessor of the 3 Live Stone. After Nuwa finished creating humans, she would place this stone on the spirit river of the western heavens. But this stone could be said to have existed since the beginning of the world. After being baptized by the essence of the sun and moon, it already had spirituality. It was even stained with the merit of Wuxia's creation of humans. With all these factors added together, anyone with half a brain would know that this stone was bound to become an extraordinary existence in the future. And this was indeed the case. Countless years later, this stone pierced the heavens and reached the apex of the heavens, almost breaking through the heavens. Two more divine patterns would appear, separating the stone into three sections, containing the will to devour the three realms of heaven, earth, and man. Even Wuxia had to go through great pains to seal this stone, but only temporarily. If she left it alone after sealing it, this stone was bound to appear again. At that time, not even Wuxia would be its match. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.